Every Tuesday at exactly 2 o'clock, a courier van stopped in front of my house. And every single time my son turned pale and rushed to grab the package before I could touch it. I thought he was hiding debt, maybe trouble at work, until one rainy afternoon the delivery driver pulled me aside and whispered, "Sir, if I were you, I'd start checking what your son does after these deliveries." My stomach dropped. That night, while my son smiled and poured me a glass of water like always, I realized something terrifying. Sometimes the people we trust most are the ones standing closest enough to destroy us. I need you to sit with me through this. One, it's not easy, but it's important. Before we begin, leave a comment. Have you ever had to question someone you thought you knew completely? Your thoughts matter here. Some details have been fictionalized to protect those involved and emphasize the lesson. What matters is the message. Every Tuesday at exactly 2 o'clock in the afternoon, a secure courier package arrived at my house, and every Tuesday my 28-year-old son turned the color of ash. At 60 years old, I had spent 35 years investigating insurance fraud, every claim, every forged signature, every staged accident, and I thought I had seen every kind of betrayal a human could devise. I retired from the Oregon Insurance Division in December 2022 with commendations, a modest pension, and a 3-bedroom house in Salem that I had paid off 10 years earlier. My retirement looked exactly like I had planned it: morning work in the back garden, Tuesday afternoon volunteer shifts at the Salem Community Senior Center, teaching fraud prevention to other retirees, quiet evenings with books I had been meaning to read for 30 years. Then my son Sterling moved back home in January 2023, claiming he wanted to take care of me after my retirement, a gesture that brought tears to my eyes at the time. He was 28, working remote tech support for a Portland startup, and he insisted I should not spend my retirement alone. He took the upstairs bedroom, paid $200 monthly for rent, kept to himself during work hours, joined me for dinner 3 nights a week. It felt like a gift. The packages started arriving in June. I was standing at my living room window on the first Tuesday afternoon when the courier van pulled up. I watched a driver in a brown uniform carry a padded envelope to my front porch, scan it, leave it beside the door. The return address read, Thornton and Associates Real Estate, the firm owned by Clayton Thornton, my best friend of 30 years. I thought nothing of it until Sterling came downstairs 20 minutes later, saw the package through the window, and went rigid. His face drained of color. His hands shook as he opened the front door and snatched the envelope off the porch. He did not open it in front of me. He carried it directly to the basement, and I heard the sound of a cabinet door closing, then the click of a lock. When he came back upstairs 15 minutes later, I asked what Clayton had sent. "It's nothing, Dad," Sterling said, his voice too high, too quick. "Just some work documents Clayton's forwarding for me." I nodded. I smiled. I did not ask another question. 35 years investigating insurance fraud taught me one fundamental truth. Everything leaves a trail. More importantly, everyone leaves tells the slight tremor in the hands, the too quick explanations, the averted eyes. Sterling had all three. The packages kept coming. Every Tuesday. Exactly 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Always from Thornton and Associates. Always the same padded envelope. Always the same reaction from Sterling: terror, immediate retrieval, basement cabinet, locked door. I did not confront him. Not yet. A fraud investigator never shows his hand until he possesses the complete evidentiary file. Confrontation without evidence yields nothing but defensive lies. So I did what I had done for 35 years. I observed. I documented. I photographed shipping labels before Sterling came home from his upstairs office. I noted the delivery times in a small notebook I kept in my desk drawer. I watched my son's body language, cataloged the inconsistencies, built the case file one Tuesday at a time. By September, I had 3 months of data, 14 deliveries total, 0 explanations that made sense. Clayton Thornton and I had known each other since 1993 when we both started at the Oregon Insurance Division on the same Monday morning. He left after 8 years to start his real estate firm. We had stayed close: monthly lunches, annual camping trips to Crater Lake, the kind of friendship that survives career changes and decades. Clayton never sent me anything without calling first. Never. And when I casually mentioned the packages during our August lunch, asked if he was forwarding something to Sterling, Clayton looked genuinely confused. "I haven't sent Sterling anything," he said. "Why would I?" I changed the subject. But I added that conversation to my documentation folder. Why would my own son be terrified of packages from my best friend's company? I sat at my study desk on a Tuesday evening in mid-September, looking at the folder I had been building since June. Observation logs written in the shorthand I had developed over 3 decades of casework. Printed photographs of shipping labels, same return address every time, same courier service, same weight notation on the tracking information. Timeline analysis showing the precise 2 o'clock pattern never varying by more than 3 minutes. Sterling had moved back home, claiming he wanted to take care of me. At the time, I believed him. A father wants to believe his son loves him enough to sacrifice independence and move back into his childhood bedroom. But professional instincts never turn off, and mine were screaming that something was fundamentally wrong. Sterling checked his phone obsessively after each delivery. He kept the basement cabinet locked even when he was home. He had started asking me questions about my routine, what time I left for my volunteer shift, when I usually returned, whether I ever came home early. At the time, I thought he was being considerate, trying not to disturb me. Now I recognized the questions for what they were: surveillance. He was tracking my schedule. 3 months of Tuesdays, 14 deliveries total, 0 explanations that made sense. I closed the documentation folder and slid it back into the false bottom of my desk drawer, the same drawer where I had kept sensitive case files during my working years, the same concealment technique that had kept evidence secure from suspects who thought they were clever enough to search an investigator's home office. Rule number 1 of insurance fraud investigation: never show your hand until you possess the complete evidentiary file. I checked my watch. It was Tuesday, September 19th. The next delivery would arrive in exactly 7 days, Tuesday, September 26th at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I would not be at my volunteer shift that day. I would be home at 1:45, 15 minutes before the courier's scheduled arrival. For the first time in 3 months, I would see what happened when Sterling thought no one was watching. I parked 3 houses down at 1:47 on Tuesday afternoon, September 26th, killed the engine, and watched my own front porch like a stakeout target. The street was quiet. My neighbor 2 doors down was mowing his lawn. A jogger passed wearing headphones. The autumn sun filtered through maple trees that had started turning orange at the edges. Everything looked normal. Everything felt wrong. I had spent 35 years conducting surveillance on insurance fraud suspects, following them to doctor's appointments they claimed were too painful to attend, photographing them, lifting furniture they swore had crippled them, documenting the gap between their stories and their actions. I never imagined I would be surveilling my own son. At exactly 2 o'clock, the brown courier van turned onto my street. I sat forward, hands on the steering wheel, watching. The van pulled up to my curb. The driver stepped out, Wade Riddle, the same courier who had been running this route for 7 years. I had always found him reliable, friendly enough to wave, professional enough to never linger too long at the door. He retrieved a padded envelope from the cargo area, the same size and shape as every previous Tuesday delivery. Before Wade reached the porch, my front door flew open. Sterling burst out like the house was on fire. He did not wait for Wade to ring the bell. He did not walk calmly down the porch steps. He sprinted, actually sprinted across the lawn, snatched the package from Wade's hands before the man could scan it, and spun around, checking the street in both directions. His face was pale. His hands shook. In 35 years of investigations, I had learned that panic is the most honest human reaction. It cannot be faked, and it cannot be hidden. Sterling was not just nervous. He was terrified. Wade said something I could not hear from 3 houses away. Sterling shook his head, clutched the package against his chest like evidence at a crime scene, and ran back inside. The front door slammed hard enough that I heard it from my car. Wade stood on my lawn for a long moment, staring at the closed door. Then he walked back to his van, climbed in, and sat there without starting the engine. I waited 2 minutes. Then I stepped out of my car and walked toward my house. Wade saw me coming. He got out of the van and met me at the edge of my driveway, glancing nervously toward my front door. "Mr. Whitfield," he said quietly. "I probably should not say anything, but is your house involved in some kind of property dispute?" I stopped walking. "Why do you ask?" Wade shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. "These packages come from Thornton and Associates down the street, real estate firm. I have been delivering them every Tuesday for months now, and your son..." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Your son's behavior has been increasingly suspicious. Every time I deliver one of these, he looks like he just robbed a bank. He checks the street, hides the packages, immediately acts terrified someone will see. The news has been full of those elder scams lately, people getting tricked into selling their homes, families forging documents. I just thought..." He stopped. "I thought you should know." My chest tightened. "Wade, how long have these deliveries been happening?" "Since June. Every Tuesday at 2 o'clock, same envelope, same return address, same panicked reaction from your son." Wade met my eyes. "Look, I've been doing this job for 7 years. I know what normal looks like. This isn't normal. How do you process the possibility that your only son and your oldest friend are conspiring to destroy you?" I thanked Wade. I kept my voice steady, my expression neutral, the way I had trained myself to do when a fraud case turned from suspicious to criminal. Wade nodded, climbed back into his van, and drove away. I stood alone in my driveway. The pieces were assembling themselves with the cold logic of evidence packages from Clayton's real estate firm arriving every Tuesday for 4 months. Sterling's terror. Wade's warning about elder property scams. The locked basement cabinet. Sterling's questions about my schedule, his insistence on moving home to take care of me, his constant tracking of when I left the house and when I returned. My son was not helping me, he was positioning me for something. I pulled out my phone and dialed Clayton's direct line, the private number I had been calling for 30 years, the number he answered, no matter what meeting he was in, no matter what time of day. It rang 4 times. Then a woman's voice I did not recognize. Thornton and Associates, Mr. Thornton's office. This is Vernon Whitfield. I need to speak with Clayton immediately. I'm sorry, Mr. Whitfield. Mr. Thornton is at a week-long conference in Portland and specifically requested no interruptions. I can take a message. This is urgent. Please tell him Vernon Whitfield called. Of course, I'll make sure he gets the message when he returns. She hung up. I stood in my driveway holding a silent phone. 1 phone call, 30 years of trust, 0 answers. In 3 decades of friendship, Clayton had never not once failed to pick up when I called that number. When my wife died 8 years ago, he answered at midnight. When I retired and needed advice on pension investments, he answered during his daughter's wedding reception. When I called to wish him happy birthday last March, he answered from a hiking trail in the Columbia River Gorge. Clayton was never unreachable, until today. The timing was not coincidental. Nothing in fraud investigation is ever coincidental. Either my best friend was complicit in whatever Sterling was doing with those packages, or someone was using Clayton's firm to commit fraud, and Clayton himself was a victim. Neither option made sense. Neither option was acceptable. But one fact was undeniable. Sterling was inside my house right now, probably locking that package in his basement cabinet, probably checking his phone, probably believing he was still invisible. Wade's warning had just confirmed what my investigator's instinct had been screaming for months. My son was not here to take care of me. He was here to take something from me. And whatever it was, it arrived every Tuesday in a padded envelope from my best friend's real estate firm. I stared at my own front door, the house I had owned for 23 years, the property I had paid off 10 years early through careful budgeting and double mortgage payments, the home I had planned to leave to Sterling when I died. Sterling was inside right now. Clayton was unreachable. The packages kept coming. And I still did not know what was in that locked basement cabinet. But I was about to find out. Sterling left for work at 8:15 Wednesday morning. I watched from the living room window as his sedan backed out of the driveway and disappeared around the corner. Then I waited 15 minutes, making certain he had not doubled back. At 8:30, I walked to the garage and retrieved my old lockpicking kit from the bottom of the red toolbox I had not opened in a decade. The canvas wrap was weathered, but the tools inside were still oiled, still functional. Lockpicking is muscle memory, 20 years since my last field breach, but the hands remember what the mind has archived. I descended into the basement. The concrete stairs were damp, the air smelling of mildew. Sterling's cabinet stood against the far wall, industrial gray metal, 4 feet tall, secured with a Schlag cylinder lock he had installed 2 months ago. I had noted the date, July 18th, the same week I mentioned feeling forgetful after my annual physical. The tension wrench held steady at 22 degrees, while my pick found the 3rd pin and the lock gave way in 3 minutes and 47 seconds faster than I had managed in a decade. The cabinet door swung open. Inside 3 unlabeled glass vials containing clear liquid, a printed instruction sheet, and Tuesday's unopened package. I pulled out the instruction sheet first. It was printed on Thornton and Associates real estate letterhead, the same logo I had seen on legitimate documents from Clayton's firm hundreds of times. But the paper quality was wrong, slightly too glossy, the kind you can print from home if you steal the right graphic file. The text was clinical medical precise, temazepam 30 mg concentration, Schedule 4 controlled substance, mix into beverage twice daily. Continue until subject exhibits stage 2 cognitive impairment markers, short-term memory loss, confusion regarding recent events, difficulty with executive function tasks, estimated timeline 60 to 90 days, continuous administration. I read it 3 times. Schedule 4, federally controlled substance, possession without prescription violates Oregon law, administration to another person without consent constitutes aggravated assault under ORS 163.185. At this dosage, 90 days of continuous exposure would trigger irreversible neurological damage. Sterling had moved back home in January, 8 months ago. I picked up one of the vials, held it to the overhead bulb. The liquid was perfectly clear, no color, no sediment, easy to dissolve in coffee, easy to hide in evening tea, easy to administer twice daily to a father who trusted his son. The instruction sheet trembled in my hand, not from age, not from fear, but from the cellular recognition that I was holding evidence of my own son's attempt to destroy my mind. I set the vial down carefully. Then I pulled out my phone and photographed everything. The vials, the instruction sheet, the forged letterhead, the unopened package. Evidence chain of custody protocol ingrained from decades of casework document position capture details. Timestamp everything. Maintain integrity. I opened Tuesday's package. Inside another vial identical to the 3 already in the cabinet, and a second instruction sheet with the same clinical text. 4 vials total. How many had already been emptied? How many times had Sterling dissolved this substance into my coffee while I read the morning newspaper? How many evenings had he handed me tea laced with medication designed to systematically erase my cognitive function? I thought about the past 8 months. The moments I had dismissed as normal aging, forgetting where I left my car keys, losing track of conversations, struggling to remember my neighbor's dog's name. I had attributed those lapses to retirement, to the natural slowing that comes with turning 60. But those were not natural lapses, those were poisoning symptoms. 8 months. Sterling had been poisoning me for 8 months. I restored the cabinet contents to their exact positions, closed the door, relocked it. The cylinder clicked smoothly, no evidence of breach. Then I walked upstairs, returned the lockpick kit to the garage, and descended again to the basement. I sat down on the concrete stairs. My phone held the photographic evidence, clear documented, court admissible. 35 years of professional training screamed the next investigative steps. Secure additional samples for laboratory analysis. Establish precise timeline. Identify acquisition. Source. Trace. Pharmaceutical supply chain. Build. Prosecutable case. But I could not write the observation log entry. I had written thousands of case reports in my career. I could draft them in my sleep following rigid insurance division protocols. Subject: crime. Evidence: motive. Recommended prosecution. Subject: Sterling Whitfield, 28 years old, my son. Crime: aggravated assault via controlled substance administration. Conspiracy to commit fraud. Elder abuse. Evidence: 4 vials, temazepam, forged corporate letterhead, systematic delivery pattern. Motive unknown. Victim: his own father. I taught Sterling to ride a bicycle in the driveway above this basement. I sat in the front row at his college graduation. I cried when he said he was moving back home to take care of me. Everything leaves a trail. I had said that phrase 10,000 times in my career, but I never expected the trail to lead here. I sat on those basement stairs for 20 minutes staring at nothing, my phone heavy with photographic evidence of a crime I could not yet bring myself to report. The temazepam explained Sterling's confidence. He had been watching me decline for months, probably documenting my confused moments to use as proof of incompetence later. But it did not explain the forged Thornton & Associates letterhead, the elaborate Tuesday delivery system, or why Clayton's firm was the vehicle for this conspiracy. More importantly, it did not explain why Sterling needed me cognitively destroyed instead of simply dead. Poison that kills is simple. Poison that degrades the mind while keeping the body alive is strategic. Whatever Sterling was building required me breathing ambulatory and legally incompetent to make my own decisions. The answer had to be somewhere in this house, in documents I had stopped paying attention to, in papers Sterling thought were safely hidden in the financial and legal framework he was constructing while my mind dissolved one temazepam dose at a time. I started searching the house at 10:47 Wednesday morning. Sterling would not return from Thornton & Associates until 6:15 that evening, which gave me 7 hours and 28 minutes to find evidence of how my son planned to steal everything I owned. I began in my bedroom. The primary wall safe was hidden behind the dresser mirror, a Century model I had installed in 1998, the year after my wife died. Sterling knew about this safe because I had opened it in front of him every April when I filed tax documents. What he did not know was that I kept a second safe behind the built-in bookshelves on the opposite wall, installed during my active investigation years when bringing sensitive case files home required redundant security. I tried the primary safe first. The combination I had used for 25 years no longer worked. Sterling had changed it on July 18th, the same day he installed a new lock on his basement cabinet, the same week I mentioned temporary forgetfulness after my annual physical. I moved to the bookshelf and pressed the release mechanism hidden inside the false spine of a 1987 insurance law textbook. The panel swung open. Inside sat backup copies of every critical document I owned, including my original will. I pulled it out and compared it to my memory. Then I returned to the primary safe. This time I used the lockpick kit. The sentry cylinder took 6 minutes slower than the basement cabinet, but acceptable for a safe I had not breached in decades. The door swung open. Inside sat my last will and testament in its legal envelope exactly where I had placed it 3 years ago. But the pages were wrong. I slid them out carefully. Page 4 came before page 3. The attachment schedule showing asset distribution was misaligned by 2 millimeters. Someone had removed these documents, read them thoroughly, and replaced them imperfectly. I read the provisions again with new eyes. Sterling Whitfield sole heir. Primary residence valued at $520,000. Investment accounts totaling $87,000. Retirement funds. The life insurance policy his mother left him. Everything I had spent 60 years building would transfer to Sterling upon my death or legal incapacitation. Legal incapacitation. That phrase carried specific meaning in Oregon estate law. A person declared mentally incompetent by medical professionals could not manage their own financial affairs. Power of attorney provisions would activate automatically, and whoever held that power could liquidate assets, transfer property, drain accounts, all perfectly legal, all beyond judicial oversight if the documents were properly executed. My son had been sitting in my home, eating meals at my table, sleeping under my roof, while methodically reviewing the inventory of everything he planned to steal the moment I was too cognitively destroyed to stop him. I photographed the tampered pages, restored them to the envelope, relocked the safe, repositioned the dresser mirror to its exact angle. Then I walked down the hallway to Sterling's bedroom. His room was neat, almost military in its organization. Bed made with hospital corners, desk clear except for a laptop docking station and a professional leather briefcase he carried to work daily. I scanned methodically, looking for the document that would connect the temazepam to the estate theft. The briefcase sat unzipped. Inside, a drafted power of attorney form. 23 pages, California legal template printed on heavy stock paper. I lifted it carefully and began reading. Power of attorney durable and irrevocable. Principal Vernon Whitfield. Attorney in fact Thornton and Associates Real Estate, Salem, Oregon. Effective immediately upon execution. I turned to page 9, clause 14. Full authority to sell, transfer mortgage, or otherwise dispose of any and all real property. No co-signature required. No waiting period. No judicial oversight. Page 11, detailed financial accounts checking savings, investment portfolios, retirement funds. Complete access. Immediate liquidation authority. Page 17 contained a signature line, blank. This document was ready. Printed, formatted, legally structured. Missing only my signature, a signature Sterling planned to obtain the moment his temazepam regimen had degraded my cognitive function enough that I would sign anything placed in front of me without comprehension. And the authorized entity was not Sterling personally. It was Thornton and Associates Real Estate, my best friend's firm, giving Sterling legal cover and institutional legitimacy. When he liquidated my estate, it would appear to be handled by a respected real estate company, not a 28-year-old son with obvious financial motive. Print date August 4th. The same day I told Sterling over breakfast that I had been feeling a bit foggy lately. I photographed every page, captured the metadata, the print timestamps, the clause numbering. Then I returned the POA to the briefcase in identical sequence, positioned the bag at the same angle, checked the desk surface for disturbance. 11:42, 6.5 hours before Sterling's return. I needed legal counsel immediately, but I could not risk digital footprint. No emails, no calendar appointments, no text messages that could be subpoenaed later if this case went to trial. I walked to my study and dialed Conrad Langley's direct office line. Conrad was 62 years old, a seasoned elder law attorney who had worked insurance fraud litigation cases alongside me 2 decades ago when he was still in the district attorney's office. After he left prosecution, we stayed in touch, monthly lunches, occasional golf, the kind of professional friendship built on mutual respect and shared investigative language. He was the only lawyer I trusted with something this devastating. He answered on the second ring. Langley. Conrad, this is Vernon Whitfield. I need an emergency consultation today in person, your office. A pause. Conrad had known me long enough to recognize when my voice carried operational urgency. Vernon, what is the urgency level? Elder financial exploitation, controlled substance assault, systematic fraud using forged corporate identity. I kept my voice steady. And Conrad, do not log this into your digital calendar. Paper only. Another pause, longer this time. I heard computer keys clicking, then stopping. I can see you in 90 minutes. Come through the building's rear entrance, parking garage level 2. His voice carried that careful neutrality attorneys use when processing serious criminal allegations. Vernon, before we meet, I need you to answer one question honestly. Are you in immediate physical danger right now? I looked down the hallway toward the kitchen where Sterling had prepared my evening tea the night before. where the glass pitcher sat innocently in the refrigerator, where every beverage I consumed was a potential delivery mechanism for the substance systematically destroying my mind. Yes, I said, I believe I am. Conrad said he would call me back within the hour with emergency protective protocols. I told him I would be careful, which was the truth, and that I would not consume anything Sterling prepared, which was also the truth. Then I hung up and began building the evidence chain that would send my son to prison. At 5:47 Thursday morning, while Sterling still slept upstairs, I retrieved the sterile evidence collection kit from my garage, the same kit I had used to secure fraud samples in corporate investigations 15 years ago, and approached the kitchen counter where last night's tea mug sat unwashed. The mug was white ceramic with faded blue lettering that read Oregon Coast Aquarium. Sterling had prepared the tea Wednesday evening, handed it to me with a smile, watched me drink half of it before I excused myself to bed, claiming fatigue. The remaining liquid sat cold and still in the bottom of the cup. I worked in the pre-dawn darkness, following chain of custody protocols ingrained from decades of casework. Sterile pipette. Evidence-grade glass container with tamper-proof seal. Label with sample identification, collection time chain of custody documentation. My hands performed the procedure with muscle memory precision. Sample ID VW-092823-01. Collection time 0547 hours. Chain of custody unbroken from source to seal. I sealed the evidence container with hands that should have been steady. I had done this procedure hundreds of times in my career, but this was the first time I was documenting my own poisoning by my own son. The sample went into a padded shipping envelope addressed to Summit Forensic Laboratory in Eugene, Oregon, 60 miles south, independent facility that handled corporate internal investigations without asking questions about client identity, employee drug screening, product tampering cases, routine industrial toxicology. I would ship it under a corporate alias using a paid post office box I maintained in the neighboring county for exactly this kind of untraceable communication. No digital trail, no credit cards, cash payment only. Laboratory turnaround time, 72 hours. By Sunday morning, I would have scientific confirmation of exactly what Sterling had been dissolving into my evening tea for the past 8 months. I drove to the neighboring county post office at 7:15, mailed the package with expedited processing, and returned home by 8:30. Sterling's sedan was gone from the driveway he had left for work at Thornton and Associates while I was securing the lab evidence. I walked to my study and sat at the desk where I had spent 3 decades reviewing fraud case files. Then I picked up my phone and dialed Clayton's private unlisted number, the personal cell line my best friend had maintained for 30 years, separate from office calls, the number only 6 people on Earth possessed. Clayton answered on the second ring, his voice carrying the easy familiarity of 30 years of friendship. I trusted him with my life, which was why I needed to know if he was trying to take it. Vernon, good to hear from you. I am still at this conference, but I can talk. What is going on? Vernon, good to hear from you. I am still at this conference, but I can talk. What is going on? His voice carried no tension, no defensiveness, no carefully constructed alibi preparation. Just genuine friendship and mild curiosity about a mid-morning call. Clayton, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Have you been sending packages to my house? A pause. Packages, Vernon, I have not sent anything to your house. Ever. What are you talking about? I believed him. 30 years of reading witness testimony and suspect interviews had taught me to distinguish genuine confusion from performed innocence. Clayton's confusion was real. Someone has been using Thornton and Associates letterhead to ship controlled substances to my address every Tuesday for months. Someone with access to your corporate materials. The silence on the line stretched for 5 seconds. Then Clayton's voice came back darker and more controlled. Sterling. Yes. He has unrestricted access to our master printer's corporate stationery and vendor procurement accounts. Vernon. Clayton stopped. I heard him take a breath. There is something else you need to know. Sterling requested 2 weeks of paid leave for mid-October. He told HR you were transitioning into assisted care and he needed to manage the placement. My chest went cold. When exactly? October 15th through October 29th. He submitted the request 3 weeks ago, first week of September. Said it was a family emergency, that you had been showing signs of cognitive decline and needed professional evaluation for assisted living facilities. August 4th to October 29th, 86 days. Sterling had given himself exactly 86 days to destroy me. I thanked Clayton, asked him to say nothing to Sterling about our conversation, and ended the call carefully. Then I pulled out a blank sheet of paper, my thinking method, the way I had always processed complex fraud cases when the evidence began forming patterns. I wrote the timeline, January 2023. Sterling moves home, claims he wants to take care of me. June 2023, first temazepam delivery. July 18th, 2023. Sterling changes my safe combination. Installs new basement lock same week I mentioned feeling forgetful. August 4th, 2023. Power of attorney. Document printed. Same day I tell Sterling over breakfast, I have been feeling foggy. September 1st, 2023. Sterling requests leave for October 15th to 29th, cites my transition into assisted care. September 26th, 2023. I discover the temazepam. October 15th to 29th, 2023, Sterling's operational window. The pieces aligned with mathematical precision. If I signed the POA in mid-October after sufficient cognitive decline demonstration, Sterling would need exactly 2 weeks to execute property liquidation, asset transfers, and departure before anyone questioned the transactions. The temazepam creates the cognitive decline. The fake medical evaluation certifies incompetence. The POA grants legal control. The 2-week leave provides the operational window to liquidate everything and disappear. My son had not just planned to steal my house. He had built a 26-month operational timeline to systematically destroy my mind, forge my legal incapacitation, liquidate my life's work, and vanish all while I was still alive to watch him do it. I wrote at the bottom of the page, in 35 years of fraud investigation, I learned one absolute rule: coincidences do not exist. When timelines align this perfectly, you are looking at premeditation. I stared at the timeline I had drawn on that blank sheet of paper. A perfect geometric progression from cognitive destruction to legal incapacitation to financial liquidation to disappearance. Sterling had built a machine, and I was standing inside it, watching the gears turn. The question was not whether I could stop the machine. The question was whether I could dismantle it without my son realizing I had woken up inside the trap. The answer came to me Friday afternoon while reviewing my documentation folder. If I wanted to dismantle Sterling's plan without him realizing I was awake inside the trap, I needed to force him to reveal his backup scenario. Every sophisticated fraud operation includes contingency planning for exposure. Sterling would have prepared a secondary narrative. I needed to see it. On Friday evening at 6:03, I placed a single printed photograph on the living room coffee table, the image of the temazepam vial from Sterling's locked cabinet, clear and unmistakable, and waited in the kitchen doorway to see what my son had prepared for getting caught. Sterling arrived home from Thornton & Associates at 6:15. I heard his car pull into the driveway, the engine cut the front door unlock. He entered carrying his leather laptop bag, keys jingling. Then his eyes found the coffee table. The photograph sat centered on the polished wood surface, 8x10 glossy print showing the unlabeled vial with the instruction sheet visible in the background. No ambiguity, no deniability. Sterling's face drained of all color. His body froze mid-step, 1 foot still raised, his entire frame, locked in that particular paralysis that comes when the brain receives information it was not prepared to process. The laptop bag slid off his shoulder and hit the floor. I watched through the kitchen doorway, standing perfectly still, cataloging every micro-expression. Shock 2 seconds, genuine uncontrolled. Calculation 3 seconds, eyes darting from photo to my bedroom door to the basement stairs. Panic 1 second, chest rising with sharp breath. Then critically performance mode. The shift was visible. His shoulders dropped. His face reorganized itself into an expression I had seen hundreds of times in fraud investigations, the suspect who has decided which prepared response to deploy. "Dad," he said, voice cracking perfectly. "Where did you get this?" I stepped out of the kitchen doorway, moving slowly, keeping my expression neutral. "I think you know exactly where I got it, Sterling." He stared at the photograph for another 3 seconds. Then his knees buckled and he collapsed onto the living room carpet. What followed was an Academy Award performance. Sterling began weeping, full emotional breakdown, hands trembling, voice breaking with precisely calibrated desperation. He covered his face, shoulders shaking, producing tears that looked entirely real because they probably were. Fear generates authentic physiological responses even when the narrative is fabricated. "Dad," he could barely speak through the sobs. "Dad, I'm so sorry, I didn't know what else to do." I sat down on the couch, positioned myself as the concerned father waiting for explanation. Sterling looked up at me with red eyes and delivered his confession. "I owe $80,000 to the wrong people, Dad. Gambling debts, sports betting. I got in too deep and couldn't stop. Clayton found out, he discovered the debts somehow, and he's been blackmailing me for months. I knew from my own financial investigation that Sterling's actual gambling debts totaled $23,000. He had just inflated the number to make the story more desperate, more believable. Clayton's forcing me to do this," Sterling continued, voice raw. He's making me slip these drugs into your beverages so you'll seem cognitively impaired. He wants to manipulate you into signing over the house at a below-market sale. He said if I don't help him, he'll report my gambling debts to the police, destroy my career, tell you everything, have me arrested. My son was weeping in my living room, delivering a performance so convincing that for 3 seconds, just 3, I wanted to believe it was real, wanted to believe he was the victim, wanted my boy back. But I had 35 years of reading lies. Sterling, I said quietly, letting my voice carry fatherly concern. Why didn't you come to me? Why didn't you ask for help? I was ashamed, he whispered. I didn't want you to know I'd failed like this. And Clayton, he has so much power, Dad. He threatened to ruin both of us. Sterling pulled out his phone with shaking hands, swiped through messages, turned the screen toward me. Look at these texts. Look at what he's been sending me. I leaned forward and read the message thread. The sender was labeled Clayton Thornton, Thornton and Associates. The messages were cold, formal, explicit. Compliance with directives outlined in attached documentation is non-negotiable. Failure to execute will result in immediate escalation to law enforcement authorities. Subject must exhibit measurable cognitive decline within specified timeline. Performance reviews will be conducted bi-weekly. Your cooperation ensures mutual protection. Deviation from protocol activates contingency measures detailed in previous correspondence. I scrolled through a dozen similar messages, each one more threatening than the last, each one building a perfect narrative of blackmail and coercion. Sterling's voice broke again. I've been protecting you, Dad. Every vial he gave me, I dumped it and filled it with vitamin powder. He thinks I'm poisoning you, but I'm not. I'm trying to save you. I've just been buying time trying to figure out how to stop him without getting us both destroyed. I looked at my son's tear-streaked face. Then I pulled him into an embrace. It's okay, son, I said, holding him while he sobbed into my shoulder. We'll figure this out together, I promise. Sterling clung to me, his entire body shaking, and inside my head counter-analysis ran at full speed. The text messages were wrong. Clayton Thornton was a 58-year-old Texas native who spoke in colloquialisms and never communicated with corporate formality. When Clayton texted me 3 weeks ago about a barbecue, the message read, BBQ at my place, 2 p.m., bring beer. Clayton did not write phrases like, compliance with directives outlined in attached documentation is non-negotiable. Clayton wrote, get it done or I'm calling the cops. The syntax was sterile, bureaucratic, lifted from legal templates. It was how someone who had never had a casual conversation with Clayton Thornton would imagine a corporate blackmailer would communicate. Sterling didn't just have a backup plan. He had forged text messages, fabricated timelines, and a complete alternative narrative ready to deploy the instant he was caught. I held Sterling while he cried, his performance so flawless I could feel other fathers believing it, other investigators missing the tells. But Sterling had made one critical mistake. He had built his backup plan around a Clayton Thornton who did not exist, the formal corporate Clayton of legal documents, not the actual man who texted me about beer and barbecue. I patted Sterling's back and murmured reassurance. And I began counting the hours until I could document every flaw in his story. Sterling went to his bedroom at 11:47 Friday night. I heard his door close, heard the lock click, heard the bed frame creak as he settled in. Then I waited. At 1:03 in the morning, once Sterling's bedroom had been silent for exactly 1 hour, I sat down at my desk with a blank observation sheet, the same method I had used to dismantle 400 fraud cases over 35 years, and began cataloging the lies my son had just told me. I started with the text messages. I placed my phone on the desk displaying Sterling's fabricated conversation with Clayton. Then I opened my actual text history with Clayton, 2 years of authentic messages, hundreds of exchanges. The contrast was immediate and absolute. Sterling's fake Clayton wrote, compliance with directives outlined in attached documentation is non-negotiable. Failure to execute will result in immediate escalation to law enforcement authorities. Real Clayton from a text 3 weeks ago, BBQ at my place, 2 p.m., bring beer. Fake Clayton, your continued non-compliance necessitates immediate corrective action. Real Clayton from July, running late, stuck in traffic, lol. Fake Clayton. Subject must exhibit measurable cognitive decline within specified timeline. Performance reviews will be conducted bi-weekly. Real Clayton from April. Can't make it tonight, truck broke down again. I scrolled through message after message. Clayton Thornton was a 60-year-old Texas native who had never lost his Amarillo accent or his casual communication style. He used contractions, abundant colloquialisms, and informal grammar. When his football team won, he texted, "Dude, your team got destroyed last night, haha." When he needed to reschedule lunch, he wrote, "Something came up, gotta push to next week, my bad." Clayton did not write like a corporate attorney drafting legal threats. He wrote like a man who had spent 30 years as my friend. I picked up my pen and wrote on the observation sheet, flaw 1 message syntax. Fabricated texts employ formal bureaucratic language inconsistent with the subject's established communication patterns over a 30-year period. Sterling studied Clayton's corporate letterhead but never studied Clayton's actual voice. Amateur mistake. Then I moved to the second flaw. I pulled up the photographs I had taken Wednesday morning in Sterling's basement cabinet. Timestamp September 27th, 2023, 8:35 a.m. 3 unlabeled glass vials, each filled with clear liquid. I zoomed in on the image, examining the contents through the transparent glass. Clear, liquid, temazepam. Sterling had claimed during his performance, "I've been secretly swapping the temazepam for crushed vitamins to protect you. Every vial he gave me, I dumped it and filled it with vitamin powder." But crushed vitamin powder is not clear liquid. Vitamin powder suspended in any liquid creates an opaque particulate suspension. Basic chemistry. Anyone who has ever mixed a protein shake or dissolved an aspirin knows this. The vials I photographed 48 hours ago contained clear liquid medication, not vitamin powder. How many hours had Sterling spent building this elaborate false confession, fabricating texts, calculating debt amounts, rehearsing the weeping performance just in case his father discovered the truth? Either Sterling was lying about the protective swap, or he had returned the real temazepam to the cabinet after claiming he had disposed of it. Neither option supported his victim narrative. I wrote Flaw 2. Physical evidence contradicts protective substitution narrative. Controlled substance present and unaltered as of Wednesday morning inspection. Subject claims months-long vitamin replacement, yet photographic documentation shows clear liquid consistent with original temazepam solution. Statement demonstrably false. I set down the pen and leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. My son had not just prepared a backup story, he had constructed an entire alternative reality complete with forged digital evidence, calculated emotional performance, and a scapegoat narrative designed to redirect all criminal liability onto an innocent man. The sophistication was staggering. I picked up the pen again and addressed the third flaw. Thursday morning, I had called Clayton's private number. We spoke for 15 minutes. 12 separate exchanges. If Clayton were truly blackmailing Sterling over an $80,000 gambling debt, that conversation would have been the perfect opportunity for leverage, explanation, or control. But Clayton said none of those things. He expressed genuine confusion about the packages. He volunteered information about Sterling's leave request without prompting. He showed no signs of defensive posturing, no attempts to manage the narrative, no indication he was protecting a criminal conspiracy. A blackmailer confronted by his victim's father does not stay completely silent about the leverage he holds. He deflects, justifies, or threatens. Clayton did none of these because Clayton knew nothing about Sterling's scheme. His innocence was not performed, it was absolute. I wrote the final assessment. Flaw 3, alleged blackmailer demonstrates zero knowledge of coercion narrative when directly questioned. Thursday, phone conversation contained no references to Sterling's debt, no defensive explanations for package deliveries, no leverage statements. Behavioral analysis indicates genuine confusion, inconsistent with criminal mastermind role. Conclusion. Subject operating double-blind fraud scheme, fabricating comprehensive evidence to redirect criminal liability to innocent third party while executing systematic elder exploitation independently. Subject demonstrates sociopathic level operational security and contingency planning. 3 flaws, 3 provable lies. 1 conclusion: I was living with a sociopath who had spent months constructing a machine designed to destroy me. I folded the observation sheet and walked to the bookshelf, pressed the release mechanism on the false spine, and placed the document in my hidden safe, the one Sterling did not know existed. 3 critical flaws documented. Sterling's backup narrative was dismantled, but I still did not have the one piece of evidence I needed, most proof of the actual delivery mechanism. Sterling claimed the tea was clean, that he had been swapping the temazepam for vitamins. If that was true, if the tea sample I sent to the Eugene laboratory came back negative, then where was Sterling really putting the medication? What was I consuming every day that I had not yet identified? I checked the calendar on my desk. Sunday morning. The lab results would arrive Sunday morning via the paid post office box in the neighboring county. 72 hours from sample collection to analysis completion. 38 hours from now, I would know whether Sterling had told one truth inside his ocean of lies, or whether the tea was exactly what I thought it was, the primary delivery vector for 8 months of systematic poisoning. I walked back to my bedroom, climbed into bed, and stared at the ceiling until dawn. Somewhere down the hall, Sterling slept peacefully, believing his performance had worked, believing his father still trusted him. And maybe that was the most devastating realization of all. 38 hours passed in a state of controlled vigilance I had not experienced since my last undercover fraud investigation in 2018. I maintained normal routines, ate meals with Sterling, watched television, went to bed at my usual time, and I waited for Sunday morning. The laboratory envelope arrived at my paid post office box at 9:47 Sunday morning, 73 hours after I had mailed the tea sample, and I opened it, sitting alone in my car in an empty parking lot because I needed to read the results without Sterling watching my face. I tore the seal and pulled out the toxicology report. Sample ID VW-092823-01. Analysis complete. Temazepam not detected. Benzodiazepine panel negative. Controlled substances screen negative. Additional findings. Trace amounts of vitamin B complex consistent with dietary supplement dissolution. The tea was clean. Sterling had told the truth. I felt no relief, only escalating clinical alarm. I pulled out my documentation folder and counted backwards through my observation log. Sterling had brewed evening tea for me 89 times over the past 3 months. Nearly every night I had been home for dinner. If the tea was clean, how was temazepam entering my system? The basement cabinet contained real medication, not vitamins. The forged instruction sheets detailed precise dosing schedules. The power of attorney timeline required months of documented cognitive decline. Sterling had told one truth to cover a deeper, more invisible lie. I sat in that parking lot for 20 minutes, forcing myself into the poisoner's perspective. What did Sterling control in my daily routine? What did I consume without question, without examination, without suspicion? Then the realization crystallized with devastating clarity. The water pitcher, January 12th. Sterling had brought home a new water filtration pitcher, heavy-duty countertop model with carbon filter system. He said the tap water tasted metallic, insisted we needed better filtration for health reasons. I thought it was thoughtful. I thought my son was taking care of me. Every single night since then, at exactly 9:30, Sterling carried that pitcher upstairs to my bedroom. He placed it on my bedside table. He said the same phrase every time, "Water's fresh, Dad. Sleep well." And I drank from it. 3 full glasses minimum before morning, sometimes 4. I consumed that water alone in my bedroom in darkness, half asleep, completely trusting. The temazepam was never in the dramatic evening tea ceremony that happened in the kitchen where I might notice an off taste or strange sediment. It was in the invisible, trusted water I drank in my bedroom when my guard was completely down. Perfect delivery mechanism. For 8 months, my son had carried poisoned water to my bedside, smiled at me, wished me restful sleep, and watched me drink it, a nightly ritual of murder disguised as filial care. I started the car and drove. 40 minutes later, I pulled into the parking lot of a private medical clinic in an adjacent city I had never visited. The facility advertised corporate drug screening and forensic toxicology services. No appointment necessary. Cash accepted. The lab technician at the intake desk was a woman in her 40s named Adrienne Moss, who processed my toxicology order with professional detachment and asked no questions about the cash payment. I provided my real name and a separate mailing address, a paid post office box, in the neighboring county I maintained for exactly this purpose. "We'll need blood, urine, and hair samples for the comprehensive toxicology panel," she said, typing into her computer without looking up. "Results in 5 business days. That will be $480 cash or card." "Cash," I said, "and I need confirmation that this order stays off any insurance databases or digital records." She looked at me, then her expression neutral but understanding. "We don't report to insurance companies unless you specifically request it. This is a private pay order, completely confidential." She led me to a collection room and drew 3 vials of blood, collected a urine sample, cut a small section of hair from the back of my head where it would not be visible. The entire process took 12 minutes. "Results will be mailed to the address you provided," she said, handing me a receipt with a confirmation number. 5 business days, possibly sooner if the lab is not backed up. I thanked her and left. I stopped at a convenience store 2 blocks away and purchased a case of sealed bottled water, 24 individual 16-ounce bottles. I loaded them into my trunk, covered them with the emergency blanket I kept for winter breakdowns, and drove home. 3 glasses every night, 8 months, 720 glasses of poisoned water, and I had thanked him every single time. I parked in my driveway at 1:15 Sunday afternoon. Sterling's car was gone. He had mentioned something about running errands that morning, though I suspected he was actually checking on whatever storage facility or safe deposit box he was using to prepare for his October liquidation plan. I carried 6 bottles of water into the house and hid them in my bedroom closet behind a box of old tax returns Sterling had no reason to access. The remaining 18 bottles stayed locked in my trunk. From this moment forward, I would never drink from the pitcher again. But Sterling could not know. The performance had to be flawless. Every night at 9:30, Sterling would carry the pitcher upstairs like always. He would place it beside my bed like always. He would tell me to sleep well, like always. And I would smile, thank him, and pretend to drink. The moment he left my room, I would pour the poisoned water into the large potted plant by my window. The jade plant that was already half dead from overwatering, though now I understood why. Then I would drink from the sealed bottles hidden in my closet. Sterling had been documenting my cognitive decline for months, probably recording every forgetful moment, every confused statement, building his evidence file to support the power of attorney execution in mid-October. He needed me declining on schedule, which meant if I suddenly stopped declining, if my symptoms plateaued or improved, he would know something had changed. I could not stop drinking from the pitcher without Sterling noticing, but I could stop the temazepam from entering my system while maintaining the appearance of consumption. I sat on my bed and calculated the timeline. Today was October 1st. Sterling's leave began October 15th. I had 14 days to gather enough evidence for prosecution to coordinate with Conrad on legal countermeasures to build a case so airtight that Sterling's backup narrative would collapse under scrutiny. 14 days to dismantle the machine while Sterling believed it was still running. I heard his car pull into the driveway at 2:30. Tonight at 9:30, the test would begin. The 9:30 performance went exactly as rehearsed. Sterling carried the pitcher upstairs, placed it on my bedside table, wished me restful sleep. I thanked him, poured the first glass, brought it to my lips while he watched from the doorway. He smiled and closed the door. I waited 30 seconds, then emptied the glass into the jade plant and drank from the sealed bottle hidden in my closet. The machine was still running. Sterling believed I was still inside it. Now I could begin dismantling it from within. On Tuesday morning at 7:42, I walked into the kitchen, placed my car keys inside the refrigerator next to the orange juice, closed the door, and waited to see if my son would show concern or satisfaction when I could not find them 10 minutes later. I made coffee. I read the newspaper. At 7:51, I stood up and patted my pockets. Sterling. I called toward the living room where he was reviewing something on his laptop. Have you seen my car keys? He looked up. Did you check your jacket pocket? I checked everywhere. I walked to the counter, opened a drawer, closed it. I could have sworn I had them when I came downstairs. Sterling stood and walked into the kitchen. His expression was concerned, helpful. But I was watching his eyes in the reflection of the microwave door, and his eyes were calculating. Let me help you look, Dad. We searched for 3 minutes. I opened the refrigerator to check if there was milk for my coffee. There they are, Sterling said, pointing. My keys sat on the shelf next to the orange juice. I stared at them, manufactured confusion on my face. How did they get in there? You must have set them down when you were getting breakfast. Sterling's voice was gentle, patient. It happens, Dad. You have been under a lot of stress. I took the keys, shook my head slowly. I do not remember putting them there. It is okay. Sterling squeezed my shoulder. We all have forgetful moments. 10 minutes later, during breakfast, I called him Stephen. Stephen. Sorry, Sterling. What time did you say you would be home from work tonight? He corrected me gently. 6:30, Dad. Same as always. Are you feeling okay this morning? Fine. Just tired. 5 minutes after that, I asked the same question again. Sterling, what time will you be home tonight? This time, I caught it clearly in the living room mirror. Sterling smiled. Not the concerned smile of a worried son. The satisfied smile of someone watching a plan execute perfectly. He pulled out his phone under the table and made a quick notation. I was performing dementia for my own son, deliberately fracturing my speech, faking memory loss, pretending to be the confused old man he was trying to create with poison, and he was smiling while he documented my decline. He was not concerned I was deteriorating. He was pleased. He had been waiting for exactly these symptoms, documenting them for some future legal or medical proceeding where he would need to prove his father was cognitively incompetent. I finished my coffee and excused myself to my bedroom, claiming fatigue. The moment Sterling left for work at 8:45, I drove to Junction City, 2 cities south, 43 miles, far enough that no one who knew me would see my car in an electronics store parking lot. I purchased a wireless surveillance camera concealed inside a clock radio, paying with an untraceable prepaid gift card I had bought at a separate store the day before. No name attached to the transaction. No credit card trail. No digital footprint connecting the device to my identity. I returned home by 3 o'clock and installed the camera on the kitchen counter, angled to capture the island where the water pitcher sat during the day. I positioned it between the coffee maker and the knife block, invisible in plain sight, just another kitchen appliance. Then I downloaded the encrypted smartphone application and tested the feed. Image quality 1080p crystal clear. Audio sensitive enough to capture conversation 15 feet away. Activation motion detected within a 3-foot radius of the pitcher. Storage 72-hour rolling loop with cloud backup completely encrypted, untraceable to my identity. This was the same surveillance protocol I had used in corporate fraud cases when executives needed to be caught on camera, falsifying documents or accepting bribes. Admissible evidence requires unbroken chain of custody and authenticated timestamps. Tonight at 9:30, Sterling would enter this kitchen, approach the pitcher, and either do nothing or commit aggravated assault with a controlled substance on camera. Either way, I would know. I spent the rest of the afternoon in my study reviewing my documentation folder, adding Tuesday morning's cognitive decline performance to my observation log. Then at 7:15, I heard Sterling's voice through the wall. My study and Sterling's bedroom shared a wall, thin drywall, poor insulation, the kind of construction that lets sound travel. I pressed my ear against it and listened. Sterling was on a phone call. His voice was muffled but distinct and completely flat, emotionless, clinical dead as a liquidator reading bankruptcy filings. "The subject is progressing perfectly ahead of schedule," Sterling said. "3 more weeks of logging will suffice." Pause. Someone responding on the other end. "Behavioral markers are consistent with stage 2 cognitive degradation, memory lapses, temporal confusion, nominal aphasia, all documented with timestamps." Another pause. "Affirmative. Timeline remains October 29th. Liquidation protocols will activate the morning of the 30th. 3 more weeks. October 29th. Sterling had given himself a deadline to finish destroying my mind. Sterling's tone was clinical professional, completely devoid of father-son emotion. He was not talking to Clayton. I had already cleared Clayton as an unwitting victim of identity theft. This was someone else. Someone with medical or legal expertise. Someone helping Sterling build a comprehensive case that his father was cognitively incompetent and required immediate intervention. A partner, a co-conspirator, someone I had not identified yet. The call ended. I heard Sterling's bedroom door open, heard him walk downstairs to the kitchen. I stayed pressed against that wall for 5 more minutes, processing what I had just heard. Stage 2 degradation. 3 more weeks. October 29th, timeline confirmed. Liquidation protocols. Sterling was not working alone. He had a professional partner, someone who spoke in clinical terminology, someone who understood cognitive assessment markers, someone who was helping him document every symptom, every decline, every piece of evidence needed to declare Vernon Whitfield legally incompetent. The question was who? A doctor, an attorney, a forensic evaluator. Whoever they were, they would be at the other end of that phone number on Sterling's call log. And tomorrow when Sterling left for work, I would find that phone and extract every contact, every message, every piece of evidence that would identify the second conspirator in the machine designed to destroy me. I planned to search Sterling's phone Wednesday morning to find the co-conspirator's number. But before I could execute that plan, I needed to know whether the surveillance camera had captured anything during the night. I woke at 6:30 Wednesday morning and opened the encrypted surveillance application on my phone before I even sat up in bed because I needed to know whether my son had poisoned me again last night or whether the performance of cognitive decline had made him wait. The application displayed a timeline of motion-activated recordings. I scrolled backwards through the overnight hours, empty kitchen, no activity, static frames of counters and cabinets in darkness. Then at timestamp 23 hours 43 minutes, the screen came alive. Sterling entered the frame from the hallway corridor. He wore sweatpants and a t-shirt, his usual sleep clothes. He moved directly to the kitchen sink, no hesitation, no environmental scan. Complete operational confidence. He knelt down and opened the cabinet beneath the sink. I had not known there was anything stored there except cleaning supplies and garbage bags. But Sterling reached past those items to the back panel and pressed something I could not see from the camera angle. A false back panel swung open. Hidden compartment. Secondary concealment location I had never discovered. Sterling extracted a small glass dropper vial identical to the ones I had photographed in his basement cabinet weeks ago. He stood, unscrewed the cap, held the dropper over the water pitcher sitting on the island. I watched him count. 1 drop, 2 drops, 3 drops, 4 drops. Controlled administration, measured dosage. The movements were clinical, precise, mechanical. Not the nervous fumbling of someone committing a crime for the first time. This was practiced efficiency. Sterling replaced the dropper in the vial, screwed the cap tight, returned the vial to the hidden compartment, closed the false panel, shut the cabinet door. Then he pulled out his phone, tapped the screen twice, probably logging the administration time, documenting compliance with his poisoning schedule, and exited the frame. Total sequence 47 seconds. My son had just attempted murder with the casual efficiency of someone checking email. I sat in my bed watching that 47-second video loop on repeat. Each replay felt like watching my son die, not the physical Sterling standing in my kitchen, but the boy I raised, the son I believed I knew dying frame by frame until only this cold stranger remained. But grief was not useful right now. Evidence was useful. I replayed the footage 3 times, noting frame-by-frame details. Sterling's posture, the exact motion of his hand as he administered the drops, the phone notation afterward, everything that would matter when this video played for a jury. Then I began the preservation protocol. First, cloud storage. I uploaded the raw source file to an encrypted server with authenticated timestamps, the kind of digital chain of custody system designed for legal evidence. The file distributed automatically across 3 geographically separated server locations. Hash verification protocol SHA-256. Any modification to the source file would alter the hash signature, proving tampering. Second, physical backup. I transferred the video to an encrypted drive, wrote a brief report documenting the surveillance installation and chain of custody, sealed everything in a tamper-evident envelope. Third, secure courier dispatch. By 8 o'clock this morning, that envelope would be in a courier van headed to Conrad Langley's law office, where it would be placed in his private vault under attorney work product privilege. Even if Sterling somehow discovered the cloud backup and had the technical sophistication to attempt deletion, he could not access Conrad's physical vault without a warrant. And obtaining that warrant would require probable cause we would immediately counter with the evidence itself. 3 independent copies in geographically separated locations. Unalterable digital evidence with complete chain of custody metadata. This single 47-second video eliminated reasonable doubt more effectively than 10,000 pages of circumstantial documentation. Juries believe their eyes. 4 drops, 47 seconds, 0 hesitation. My son poisoned me with less emotional investment than most people show brewing coffee. I set down my phone and walked to my desk. I pulled out my investigator's logbook, the bound notebook I had maintained since the first Tuesday package arrived in June. Physical documentation, handwritten entries, the kind of analog evidence that carries weight in courtrooms because it cannot be backdated or digitally manipulated without leaving obvious forensic traces. I turned to a blank page and began writing the final case assessment. Case file VW-Sterling-09-2023. Video evidence secured October 3rd, 2023, 23:43 hours. Subject Vernon Whitfield, 28 years old. Crime: aggravated assault via Schedule 4 controlled substance administration. Elder financial exploitation conspiracy. Systematic poisoning with intent to incapacitate for purpose of fraudulent property transfer. I documented the surveillance installation, the chain of custody, the preservation protocol. Then I wrote the operational assessment. Subject displays complete emotional detachment during commission of crime. Movements practiced efficient, devoid of hesitation or moral conflict. Behavioral profile consistent with antisocial personality disorder. Remorse probability 0. Subject treats attempted murder as routine operational task, documenting administration via phone notation immediately following dosage delivery. I paused, considering the totality of evidence I had compiled over the past month. The temazepam vials, the forged power of attorney, the fabricated text messages, the systematic Tuesday delivery pattern, the October 29th timeline, and now this video documentation of the actual poisoning captured with timestamp authentication and multiple preservation redundancies. Evidentiary threshold achieved. I wrote the final line: recommendation, initiate termination phase. I closed the logbook and placed it in my hidden safe, the one Sterling still did not know existed. The evidence-gathering investigation was complete. Every element required for prosecution was documented, preserved, and secured beyond Sterling's reach. The termination phase meant something specific in fraud investigation terminology. It meant the target had provided enough evidence to guarantee conviction. It meant the investigator stopped gathering and started executing. It meant the machine Sterling had built to destroy me was about to be turned against him. I locked the safe and checked my watch. 8:03. Sterling would wake in approximately 45 minutes, come downstairs, ask how I slept, probably inquire whether I drank the water he left for me. And I would smile, tell him I slept well, thank him for taking such good care of his old father. Because the evidence phase was complete, but the trap phase required Sterling to remain completely unaware that I had just documented his final mistake. He needed to believe the machine was still running, that his father was still inside it, declining on schedule toward the October 29th liquidation date. But before I could execute the termination sequence, I needed one more critical piece of information: the co-conspirator's identity. The co-conspirator's identity would have to wait. First, I needed to understand exactly how Sterling had manipulated the one witness I thought I could trust, Wade Riddle. I called Wade Thursday morning and asked him to meet me at a quiet coffee shop on the edge of Salem, away from the courier routes where someone might recognize his delivery van. Wade arrived 6 minutes early, ordered black coffee he did not drink, and sat in the corner booth with his back to the wall like a man preparing to confess something that had been eating him alive for months. I slid into the booth across from him and activated the concealed digital audio recorder in my jacket pocket. I had informed Wade at the start of our meeting that I intended to document our conversation for legal purposes, and he had agreed without hesitation. Every word would matter for the prosecution file. "Mr. Whitfield," Wade said before I could speak. His voice was breaking. "I have been waiting for you to call. I could not sleep. I need to tell you something." "I am listening." "Sterling paid me $200 cash 6 months ago, April I think it was, and gave me exact instructions." Wade's hands shook around his untouched coffee cup. "He said if you ever caught me during a delivery, if you ever intercepted one of those Tuesday packages, I was supposed to warn you about elder property scams. Make sure I mentioned Thornton Associates. Make sure I said he looked suspicious. Point you toward Clayton." The words hit me like physical blows. "What exactly did Sterling tell you to say, Wade, word for word?" Wade pulled out his phone, swiped to a notes application. "I wrote it down because I felt guilty. He said if my father ever catches you during a delivery, tell him you are worried about elder property scams. Make sure you mention Thornton Associates. Make sure you say I look suspicious. Point him toward Clayton." Those were his exact words. Point him toward Clayton. Sterling had not just committed fraud. He had weaponized a witness-scripted false testimony and orchestrated my investigation to destroy my oldest friendship while he operated invisibly in the background. What Wade revealed next confirmed the final piece of the mechanism Sterling had constructed around me. "There is more," Wade said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Sterling asked me to track your schedule, Mr. Whitfield. He wanted to know which Tuesdays you came home early from your volunteer shift at the community center. He said he needed to know when to act more worried, when to make his panic look authentic if you ever witnessed a delivery. Sterling paid you to monitor my movements. Not exactly monitor, just notice patterns. Report back when I saw your car in the driveway earlier than usual on Tuesdays." Wade met my eyes. "And honestly, Mr. Whitfield, my worry about Sterling was real. That kid always looked guilty when he grabbed those packages. I just added the part about Clayton and the property scams because Sterling paid me to. How many hours had Sterling spent planning this, calculating exactly how his father would think, exactly which clues would trigger investigation, exactly how to turn a 35-year career in fraud detection into a weapon against itself? Did Sterling mention anyone else helping him?" I asked. "Anyone giving him advice, providing medical expertise, helping him document my supposed cognitive decline?" Wade shook his head. "He never mentioned anyone, just gave me the money, told me what to say, asked me to text him when I saw patterns in your Tuesday schedule. That is all I know." I thanked Wade, told him I would be in touch, assured him his cooperation would be noted when this case went to prosecution. He left the coffee shop walking like a man who had just unburdened a crushing weight. I sat alone in that booth for 10 minutes processing the full scope of Sterling's manipulation. He had not just poisoned my body, he had poisoned my mind, my instincts, my trust in my own professional judgment. He paid Wade $200 to plant exactly the right clues: elder scams in the news, suspicious packages from Clayton's firm, suggestions to investigate my son's connection to the real estate company. Sterling knew I would be thorough. He knew I would follow evidence. He knew I would immediately suspect Clayton once Wade pointed me in that direction. Sterling had turned my greatest professional strength into a vulnerability by making me investigate exactly where he wanted me to look while he operated in my blind spot. The psychological sophistication was terrifying. I walked to my car, sat in the driver's seat, and called Conrad. "It is time to loop in the FBI Portland field office," I said when he answered. "We have established clear wire fraud across state lines involving real estate assets and forged corporate documents. Sterling is operating a sophisticated conspiracy that crosses state boundaries, and I now have witness testimony proving he manipulated evidence to frame an innocent man." Conrad was silent for a moment. "FBI involvement escalates this significantly, Vernon. Federal charges, federal sentencing guidelines. Are you certain?" "I have video evidence of Sterling poisoning me with a controlled substance. I have forged power of attorney documents. I have embezzlement records showing he stole from Clayton's firm. I have Wade's testimony proving Sterling paid a witness to plant false evidence. And I have a hidden co-conspirator somewhere in this network providing medical or legal expertise." I gripped the steering wheel. This is interstate wire fraud conspiracy involving elder exploitation. FBI jurisdiction is not just appropriate, it is necessary. "I will make the contact," Conrad said. His voice carried that careful tone attorneys use when a case crosses from civil dispute into federal criminal territory. Expect Special Agent Celeste Caldwell to reach out within 48 hours. She handles complex fraud and elder abuse cases out of the Portland field office. Vernon, once federal authorities are involved, this becomes irreversible. Sterling will face decades in federal prison. I looked at the coffee shop where Wade had just confessed his role in Sterling's machine. Decades in prison, I said quietly, is exactly what my son has earned. The federal prosecution moved forward. Conrad initiated contact with the FBI Portland field office. Special Agent Celeste Caldwell would reach out within 48 hours to begin the interstate fraud investigation. Sterling would face decades in federal prison for what he had done. But first, I needed to understand the full scope of how long he had been planning it. Clayton called me at 9:17 Thursday night, and the tone in his voice was not anger or shock, but that flat, dangerous calm men use when they are trying very hard not to scream. "The audit is complete," he said without preamble. "Vernon Sterling has been stealing from me for 18 months, $47,000 through a ghost vendor account he created called Pacific Medical Supply Solutions." I sat down at my desk, pulled out a blank sheet of paper. "When did it start, Clayton? Exact date." "April 2022. Clayton's voice cracked slightly. 6 months before you retired. 6 months before Sterling ever mentioned moving back home to take care of you. He was building this infrastructure while you were still working full-time, still healthy, still. Vernon, he was planning this before you even knew you needed planning for." April 2022. I wrote the date at the top of the blank page and stared at it. Sterling was 26 years old in April 2022. I was still employed at the Oregon Insurance Division, working 40 hours per week, showing zero signs of cognitive decline or physical frailty. I had not even considered retirement yet, and Sterling had already begun stealing money to fund my destruction. "How did he do it?" I asked. "Classic ghost vendor scheme," Clayton said. His forensic auditor training was taking over, turning emotional devastation into clinical analysis. Sterling created a fictitious company, Pacific Medical Supply Solutions, with falsified incorporation documents, fake tax ID, legitimate-looking invoices. He had junior accountant access to our approval systems, so he could process small payments that flew under executive review thresholds. $2,000 here, $3,000 there. Over 18 months, it added up to $47,000. Where did the money go? Offshore cryptocurrency account, then to 3 different unlicensed digital pharmaceutical suppliers operating out of Eastern Europe and Southeast Asia. Clayton's voice hardened. The forensic trail shows bulk temazepam purchases, express international shipping, untraceable transaction chains using cryptocurrency to avoid banking oversight. Sterling was not buying street drugs, Vernon. He was procuring pharmaceutical-grade controlled substances using my stolen money. 18 months. My son had been building the infrastructure to destroy me for 18 months, stealing money, establishing offshore accounts, researching controlled substances, all while I was still working, still healthy, still believing he loved me. "What are you filing?" I asked. "DOJ White-Collar Crime Unit, formal criminal complaint, aggravated theft in the first degree under Oregon, revised statutes, 164.057, a Class B felony." Clayton's words came fast, precise, angry. "Theft exceeding $10,000, maximum statutory penalty 10 years. This is separate from your case, Vernon. Even if somehow your charges failed, which they will not. Sterling faces a decade for stealing from me alone. He destroyed our friendship, framed me for his crimes, and stole $47,000 to fund poisoning you. I want him prosecuted to the absolute maximum extent Oregon law allows." We spoke for another 15 minutes. Clayton provided documentation details, timeline specifics, forensic audit methodology. Then he said he needed to call his attorney and ended the conversation. I sat at my desk with the blank page in front of me and began reconstructing the complete timeline. April 2022. Sterling initiates embezzlement from Thornton Associates, creates ghost vendor profile, begins systematic theft to fund future criminal operations. Age 26. October 2022. I announce retirement plans over family dinner. Sterling's immediate response, "Dad, let me move back home and take care of you." I thought he was being loving. He was positioning himself for access. January 2023. I retire from Oregon Insurance Division. Sterling moves into my house. Water filtration pitcher purchased. Systematic poisoning begins. Sterling, age 27. September 2023, I discover the poisoning scheme. Evidence gathering phase initiates. October 2023, federal investigation begins. Clayton files embezzlement complaint. Sterling faces multiple felony charges. Sterling, age 28. I stared at the timeline. Sterling did not see me retire and decide to steal from me. Sterling waited 18 months for me to retire so he could steal from me. He began building criminal infrastructure in April 2022, 6 months before I even announced retirement plans, 8 months before I actually retired, 9 months before he moved into my house. Sterling was not reacting to opportunity. Sterling was creating opportunity. The embezzlement-funded controlled substance procurement. The cryptocurrency transactions created untraceable pharmaceutical supply chains. The ghost vendor profile established plausible deniability if anyone questioned unusual corporate expenditures. And then Sterling waited. He waited for me to announce retirement. The moment I did, October 2022 over Sunday dinner, Sterling immediately volunteered to move back home and help his aging father. I remember crying that night, overwhelmed by his generosity and love. But Sterling was not being generous. Sterling was executing a plan he had been building for 6 months, positioning himself inside my home so he could begin the poisoning phase the moment I retired, and the cognitive decline narrative would have medical plausibility. You cannot claim a 60-year-old fraud investigator working full-time is cognitively impaired, but you can claim a 60-year-old recent retiree is showing early dementia symptoms. Sterling needed me retired for his story to work, so he waited. He stole money for 18 months. He researched pharmaceuticals. He established supply chains. He built the complete operational infrastructure. And then he waited for me to retire so he could activate the machine he had spent a year and a half constructing. This was not opportunistic crime. This was strategic warfare. I sat in my study staring at that timeline until the numbers blurred. Every conversation Sterling and I had over those 18 months, every family dinner, every phone call asking how work was going, every expression of concern about my health and retirement planning had been performance. Sterling was not my loving son during that period. Sterling was an operative waiting for his target to move into position. My retirement had not created an opportunity for Sterling. My retirement had been the target Sterling was waiting for all along. The question was no longer what Sterling had done. The question was who had taught him to do it so perfectly. The answer came Friday morning when I deliberately requested what Sterling had been waiting months for me to ask. I told Sterling over breakfast that I was frightened by my memory lapses and wanted to see a psychiatrist, and I watched his face transform from calculated concern into barely concealed satisfaction as he recommended Dr. Rufus Keller without hesitation. "Dr. Keller is excellent, Dad," Sterling said, already pulling out his phone. "He specializes in cognitive assessments for older adults. Let me see if he can fit you in today." Dr. Keller could fit me in that afternoon at 2 o'clock. Sterling drove me to the appointment himself. Dr. Rufus Keller operated a small private practice on the outskirts of Salem. A 56-year-old psychiatrist with immaculate credentials displayed on his wall and a smile that never reached his calculating eyes. I observed everything with an investigator's discipline. Dr. Keller seated me across from his desk and picked up a clipboard that was already partially filled out. "Mr. Whitfield, I am going to ask you some simple memory questions," he said in that careful voice doctors use with confused elderly patients. "Just answer as best you can. There are no wrong answers here." I glanced at his clipboard while he organized papers. The angle was wrong for him to notice I could read upside down, a skill developed over 35 years reviewing documents across desks. Section 4. B cognitive function assessment. Already checked. Moderate impairment. Section 7. Recommendation. Already filled. Requires supervised care and financial management assistance. He had marked these sections before I walked into the room. Dr. Keller began his evaluation with deliberately leading questions designed to force answers suggesting dysfunction. The cognitive assessment used irregular, non-standard methodology. Every response I gave he framed with language suggesting impairment. I played along. I deliberately hesitated on basic recall. I pretended to struggle with simple arithmetic. I let my hands tremble slightly. And I memorized everything: his licensing number, his office registration details, his protocol violations. This was not a medical evaluation. This was prefabricated institutional fraud, and Sterling had found the operator. "Doctor," I said, slowly, performing confusion. "I am sorry, could you repeat the question? I seem to have difficulty focusing today." "Of course, Mr. Whitfield, take your time." After 40 minutes, Dr. Keller concluded with a diagnosis I knew he had written before I arrived. I excused myself to the restroom. Once inside, I sent an encrypted message to Conrad Flagg, Dr. Rufus Keller, Oregon Medical Board, fraudulent evaluation, suspect serial offender, emergency court petition for independent assessment required immediately. Conrad filed the emergency petition within 2 hours. By Monday morning, I was at Oregon Health and Science University in Portland, undergoing comprehensive neuropsychological evaluation. Board-certified neuropsychologists, standardized protocols, strict forensic documentation, 8 hours of testing across 2 days. The results were unassailable. Conrad called Wednesday morning with the OHSU report. Vernon, you scored in the 94th percentile for your age demographic. Superior cognitive function, 0 impairment. This report is now permanent sealed court record. Sterling's entire cognitive decline narrative is dead. That same Wednesday, I received another call from a Portland area code. Mr. Whitfield, this is Special Agent Celeste Caldwell, FBI, Portland Field Office. The woman's voice was professional direct. I specialize in interstate elder financial exploitation cases. I have reviewed your evidentiary package. We are opening a federal investigation. Special Agent Celeste Caldwell was 47 years old, worked out of the FBI Portland Field Office on the 12th floor overlooking the Willamette River, and had prosecuted complex fraud for 19 years. Agent Caldwell, I have video evidence of controlled substance administration, embezzlement documentation, and a corrupt psychiatrist falsifying records. I said, how quickly can federal charges proceed? We move fast on elder exploitation with this documentation level, she said. Expect formal charges within 3 weeks. Grand jury indictment within 6. Your son is going to federal prison, Mr. Whitfield. For 5 years, Dr. Rufus Keller had been systematically destroying elderly minds on paper, falsifying diagnoses, enabling theft, collecting cash payments, and Sterling had found him, studied him, hired him, and believed this machine would work on me. Thursday morning, the Oregon Medical Board issued a flash notice. Dr. Rufus Keller billing privileges suspended immediately active investigation for medical fraud involving 3 prior victims over past 5 years. Identical methodology, pre-marked cognitive impairment diagnoses, collaboration with family members forcing guardianship proceedings, cash payments for fraudulent certifications. Total fraudulent proceeds $127,000, facing permanent license revocation. Consecutive felony indictments under Oregon, revised statutes, 162.075 and federal conspiracy charges. Dr. Keller contacted the district attorney offering complete cooperation. Conrad called with details. Keller will testify against Sterling, full documentation of their arrangement, and Vernon Sterling paid him $8,500 cash for the fraudulent diagnosis. Keller kept meticulous records. 3 prior victims, I said quietly. Sterling did not invent this scheme. No, he joined an existing criminal enterprise. Keller has been running this operation for 5 years. Sterling found him, approached him with a detailed plan, and paid him to execute the medical fraud component. Conrad's voice carried grim satisfaction. We now have a cooperating insider witness who can dismantle Sterling's entire conspiracy. 3 prior victims, 5 years of operation, $127,000 in fraudulent proceeds, and now one terrified psychiatrist offering complete cooperation to save himself. I sat in Conrad's office Thursday afternoon while he briefed me on Keller's cooperation agreement. The midpoint reversal was complete. I had unassailable medical validation from OHSU, property frozen by court order, video evidence of poisoning, embezzlement documentation. FBI investigation officially opened, and now a cooperating insider witness. Sterling believed his cognitive impairment trap was progressing perfectly. He had no idea the entire foundation had collapsed 3 days ago. Now I simply had to wait for Sterling to spring his own trap. I did not have to wait long. Sterling came home Friday evening carrying the worn leather briefcase he always brings when he believes he is winning, and I knew the moment had finally arrived for me to sign the document that would either destroy me or destroy him. He found me in the living room reading a book I had been holding for 20 minutes without turning a single page. Dad, Sterling said, his voice carrying that calculated filial anxiety he had perfected over months of performance. Clayton called again today. The collection lawsuits are moving forward unless we act immediately. If you sign this power of attorney letting me handle the estate paperwork, he has agreed to drop the actions. It is the only way to protect the house. He pulled the document from his briefcase, 23 pages of dense legal text, the same power of attorney I had discovered and photographed in his bedroom weeks ago. I let my hands tremble as I reached for it. Not difficult part of me actually was shaking, though, not from cognitive impairment, from the knowledge that this single signature would trigger everything. Where do I sign, son? My voice came out confused, elderly, exactly the performance Sterling had been waiting months to witness. Here my hands are shaking so much lately. Page 17, Dad, right there on the signature line. I gripped the pen with elderly shakiness and signed my name across the line. What Sterling did not know, what he could not know, because he only checked the signature page, was that I was not signing his power of attorney. I was signing the decoy version Conrad Langley had engineered, visually identical to Sterling's draft, but embedded with a restrictive, self-canceling legal clause on page 3 that stripped the attorney in fact of any liquidation powers, The document Sterling held was worthless. But Sterling saw only what he wanted to see: my signature on the line that would give him control of everything I owned. He immediately pulled out his phone and photographed the signature page. Then he sent a text message I could see from the angle of his screen: execution complete. Initiate liquidation cycle. Timeline confirmed 72 hours to closing. I watched my son photograph that signature with the same expression of triumph I saw when he graduated college. Pride, accomplishment, joy, except this time his victory was my signed authorization for him to destroy everything I had built over 60 years. Or so he believed. "Thank you, Dad," Sterling said, squeezing my shoulder with what might have passed for genuine affection if I had not spent the past 2 months documenting his systematic attempt to poison me. "I know this was difficult, but you are doing the right thing. I will take care of everything." He left that evening to celebrate with friends, leaving me alone with the knowledge that the first domino had just fallen. The second domino fell Tuesday evening. Clayton arrived at my house at exactly 7 o'clock, playing his scripted role with the precision of a man who understood that federal prosecution depended on his performance. He was aggressive, predatory, the threatening creditor Sterling had been describing to me for weeks. "Mr. Whitfield," Clayton said loudly enough for Sterling to hear from the kitchen, "these transfer documents finalize our settlement arrangement. Your son has been very cooperative in resolving this matter." I fumbled with the papers, signed the property transfer addendum containing Conrad's hidden self-canceling watermark, performed advanced cognitive confusion with an elderly man's bewildered compliance. Sterling stepped in, playing protective son with practiced ease. "We have an understanding then," Sterling said, shaking Clayton's hand. "The property transfer processes through your firm debts are cleared, everyone moves forward." "Exactly," Clayton said. They walked to the driveway together. I watched through the window as they spoke for another 3 minutes, Sterling collecting the signed documents, Clayton maintaining his aggressive creditor posture, 2 men completing what appeared to be a successful shakedown of a confused elderly victim. What Sterling did not know, an unmarked FBI surveillance van sat parked 3 houses down. Special Agent Celeste Caldwell and an Oregon State investigator were inside, recording every word through the federal wire transmission device Clayton wore concealed beneath his shirt. Authorized by federal warrant, time-stamped, admissible in any court. Sterling pulled out his phone the moment Clayton drove away. I could not hear the conversation from inside the house, but Conrad would play it for me 30 minutes later. 72 hours. Sterling gave himself 72 hours to liquidate $500,000 and disappear before anyone noticed the fraud. Clayton returned to his car and drove directly to the FBI Portland field office, where he surrendered the wire device and signed federal witness testimony. I sat alone in my living room waiting. Conrad called at 7:30. "The recording is complete," he said. "Vernon, I am going to play you the federal audio feed captured from Clayton's wire device. Listen carefully." He pressed play. Sterling's voice came through the phone speaker. Calm, professional, completely devoid of father-son emotion. The voice of a man executing a business transaction. "Hayes, the property deeds are secured. Initiate liquidation protocol. Timeline 72 hours maximum before county recorder flags irregularities. Execute immediately." A second voice responded: "Hayes Greer, the notary accomplice Sterling had been coordinating with for months. Confirmed. Offshore accounts ready. Wire transfers Q Saturday morning. Mexico City departure booked Sunday evening." "Perfect," Sterling said. "This time Sunday everything liquidates and we disappear." The recording ended. I sat holding my phone, listening to my son's voice, arranging the final liquidation of everything I owned, confirming his escape timeline to Mexico, coordinating with his co-conspirator to execute the theft he had been planning for 18 months. My son just committed federal wire fraud conspiracy on a federal audio recording while standing 10 feet from an FBI special agent. He believed he won. He had no idea he just handed them his complete confession. "The audio is time-stamped, authenticated, and already filed with the U.S. Attorney's Office," Conrad said. "Sterling just provided federal prosecutors with unassailable evidence of interstate wire fraud conspiracy to commit elder exploitation and flight risk confirmation. The arrest warrants are being prepared as we speak." I ended the call with Conrad and walked to my bedroom window overlooking the driveway where Sterling had stood 20 minutes ago, triumphant and oblivious. He had just signed his own federal indictment on audio recording while believing he was executing the perfect crime. The 72-hour countdown he mentioned to Hayes was not his liquidation timeline. It was the window before federal arrest warrants would be issued. The 72-hour window Sterling had given himself closed faster than he anticipated. At 9:47 on Wednesday morning, Sterling walked into the Marion County Recorder's office carrying the signed property transfer documents in a leather portfolio, and I sat at home knowing the next phone call I received would tell me whether the lis pendens had held or whether Conrad's legal architecture had somehow failed. Conrad called at 10:03. The clerk flagged the list pendants at 9:52, he said. His voice carried that controlled satisfaction attorneys feel when their legal strategy executes perfectly. Transaction frozen, under Oregon Revised Statutes 93.740. Sterling cannot transfer, sell, or mortgage the property while our declaratory relief lawsuit is active. The legal wall is holding. What about the POA clause? I asked. Did anyone catch it? Sterling hired real estate attorney Hugh Brennan 2 hours ago to challenge the freeze, Conrad said. Brennan reviewed the power of attorney and discovered the page 3 clause. He withdrew from representation 20 minutes ago. Sterling now has 0 legal counsel and 0 legal pathway to liquidate. Hugh Brennan was a Salem real estate attorney. Sterling had retained Wednesday afternoon in a panic, hoping to bypass the property freeze through legal technicality. But Brennan had done exactly what any competent attorney would do. He read the entire document before filing challenges. And the moment he saw the self-canceling clause on page 3, stripping the attorney in fact of liquidation powers, he recognized attempted fraud and immediately withdrew to protect his own license. Meanwhile, Conrad continued, Hayes Greer just sent Sterling an ultimatum via text message. Our surveillance intercept captured it. You have 48 hours to clear title or deal is dead and I am out. Sterling had spent 26 months building this machine, stealing money, forging documents, poisoning water, manipulating witnesses, and now in 48 hours every gear had seized, every component had failed, and he was trapped inside his own collapsing architecture. Thursday afternoon, Sterling left the house for another emergency legal consultation. I watched his car disappear down the street, waited 15 minutes to ensure he had not doubled back, then walked upstairs to his bedroom. I searched methodically the way I had been trained to search during fraud investigations, starting with obvious locations, working toward concealment points that required operational sophistication. I found the journal under a loose floorboard beneath his bed, hidden inside a partially unzipped travel duffel bag. Small black-bound notebook, plain cover, no external markings. I opened it. The first page was dated March 2021. Dad will never believe I am capable of pulling this off. That is exactly why I will succeed. He sees me as his loving son. That blindness is my operational advantage. March 2021. Sterling began planning my destruction in March 2021. I did not retire until January 2023. He spent 22 months waiting for me to become vulnerable. I turned the pages reading his handwritten operational blueprint spanning 26 months. April 2022. Initial funding secured via ghost vendor account. Target 50,000 operational budget. Temazepam supplier identified. June 2022. Cryptocurrency payment protocols established. Offshore pharmaceutical contact confirmed. August 2022. Dr. Keller initial contact. Negotiation terms agreed. Cash payment structure, $8,500 upon execution. October 2022. Dad announced retirement. Positioning phase initiated. Proposed move-in under care pretense. January 2023. Residence established. Water filtration system installed. Baseline dosing commenced. Every month documented, every payment logged, every step of the conspiracy mapped in Sterling's precise handwriting. Then I reached the final entries. November 24th, 2023. Day A, POA signature execution confirmed. Liquidation cycle initiated. November 28th, 2023. Day A+4. Property transfer document signed. Hayes coordination complete. December 1st, 2023. Day A+7. Departure flight. I turned to the back cover, taped inside a printed boarding pass. Aeromexico Flight 692, Portland International Airport to Mexico City. Departure 6:15 hours. December 1st, 2023. One-way ticket, non-refundable. Purchased September 14th, 2.5 months ago, when Sterling still believed his plan was proceeding flawlessly. Today was Thursday, November 30th. Sterling's flight departed in less than 40 hours. I carefully replaced the journal in exact position, restored the floorboard, exited his room, and walked downstairs to my study. I sat at my desk calculating timelines. If Sterling boarded that flight to Mexico, federal jurisdiction became complicated. Extradition uncertain. Pursuit costly and delayed. He would disappear across an international border with whatever liquid assets he had already moved offshore, and building a case to bring him back could take years. I dialed Conrad immediately. Sterling has a flight Friday morning, I said the moment he answered. Aeromexico 692 to Mexico City, departing Portland International 6:15 a.m. One-way ticket. If he boards that plane, we lose him. Conrad was silent for 3 seconds. That is 38 hours from now. FBI Portland needs minimum 24 hours to coordinate airport extraction with TSA and Port of Portland Police. Are you certain about the flight? I found his journal, the entire 26-month blueprint handwritten. The flight ticket is taped inside the back cover. I kept my voice steady. This was never about stealing my house and staying in Oregon. This was about liquidating everything and disappearing to Mexico before I realized what happened. I am calling Special Agent Caldwell immediately, Conrad said. Stand by. He called back 12 minutes later. Extraction coordinated, he said. His voice carried that absolute certainty prosecutors use when a case moves from investigation to execution. Special Agent Caldwell will coordinate with TSA and Port of Portland Police. Extraction team will be positioned at security checkpoint. Sterling will be arrested the moment he presents his boarding pass. Vernon, this happens Friday morning at approximately 5:45 a.m. Conrad paused. You should consider whether you want to be there. I looked out my study window toward the driveway where Sterling would return in an hour, still believing he had 48 hours to salvage his collapsing plan, still believing he could board a flight to Mexico and escape everything he had done. I thought about the journal still hidden in his room. 26 months of meticulous planning. Every betrayal documented in his own handwriting. The first page dated March 2021 when I was still working full-time, still healthy, still believing my son loved me. I knew exactly where I would be Friday morning. I drove to Portland International Airport in darkness Friday morning, arriving at 5:15, 30 minutes before the extraction team would move into position. My son walked toward the TSA security checkpoint at Portland International Airport, carrying a single black duffel bag and a boarding pass to Mexico City. And he had no idea that 3 Oregon State Police detectives, 2 FBI agents, and one 60-year-old father who had spent 6 months documenting every pill he dissolved were waiting for him on the other side of the metal detectors. I positioned myself 30 feet back from the checkpoint behind a support pillar near Gate C7 where I could observe without being immediately visible. The airport was moderately busy for early December business travelers and holiday passengers filling the security queues. Everyone focused on their own departures, their own destinations, oblivious to what was about to happen 10 feet from the body scanner. Sterling appeared calm, confident. He wore dark jeans and a North Face jacket, the black duffel slung over his shoulder containing everything he planned to take to his new life in Mexico. I watched him check his phone twice. I watched him glance at the departure board showing Aeromexico Flight 667 departing at 7:15. I watched him adjust the duffel strap with the casual movement of a man who believed he had executed the perfect crime. Special Agent Celeste Caldwell stood near the TSA podium wearing civilian clothes, gray blazer khakis, her FBI credentials concealed, but her posture unmistakable to anyone who had spent decades reading body language in fraud investigations. 2 Oregon State Police detectives were positioned at the exit lanes beyond the metal detectors, also in plain clothes. One was a broad-shouldered man in his 40s wearing a Portland Blazers windbreaker. The other was a woman with blonde hair pulled back tight, standing with the particular alertness of law enforcement waiting for a signal. My hands shook as I watched Sterling place his boarding pass and driver's license on the podium for the TSA agent. 6 months of documentation, 47 recorded doses, $18,000 in legal fees, video evidence, audio recordings, medical reports, witness testimony, federal investigation, all of it converging in this single moment at a security checkpoint where travelers removed their shoes and laptops and belts, unaware that an arrest for attempted murder was about to occur. Sterling cleared the metal detector. He retrieved his duffel from the conveyor belt. He began walking toward the Concourse C gates. He made it exactly 14 steps. Special Agent Caldwell and the 2 Oregon State Police detectives converged from 3 directions. Caldwell's voice was calm, professional, audible, even over the airport announcements. Sterling Whitfield, I am Special Agent Celeste Caldwell with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Please place your bag on the ground and keep your hands visible. Sterling froze. His face transitioned through 4 distinct expressions in 2 seconds: confusion, recognition, calculation, panic. The male detective moved to Sterling's left side. The female detective positioned herself at his right. Travelers stopped, stared, pulled out phones. TSA agents stepped back. The security checkpoint area went silent except for Caldwell's voice. You are under arrest for attempted murder in violation of Oregon Revised Statute 163.095 and ORS 161.405, and financial exploitation of an elder in violation of ORS 124.110. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Sterling's eyes scanned the checkpoint area looking for exits, for escape routes, for any path that did not end in handcuffs. That was when he saw me. I stood 30 feet away near the support pillar, watching him with the same expression I wore when I caught him stealing $20 from my wallet when he was 12 years old. The airport PA system announced Aeromexico Flight 667 to Mexico City, now boarding at Gate C14. Passengers in zones 1 through 3 may now board. Sterling would never hear his zone called. The male detective moved behind Sterling and began the handcuffing procedure. Right wrist secured, then left. Metal clicking into place with that distinctive ratchet sound I had heard on television 1,000 times but never imagined I would hear applied to my own son. Sterling did not resist. He stared at me across 30 feet of airport tile while travelers filmed the scene on smartphones and a TSA supervisor spoke urgently into a radio. "You have the right to an attorney," Caldwell continued with clinical precision. "If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you. Do you understand these rights as I have explained them to you?" Sterling did not answer her. His eyes remained locked on mine. The detectives began to escort him toward a secure airport police office beyond the checkpoint, but Sterling stopped. He planted his feet. He forced them to pause. His voice carried across the distance, not loud, not angry, just bewildered and small and 28 years old. "Why did you come?" Everyone in the security area heard the question. Travelers, TSA agents, FBI agents, police detectives. All of them watching this moment between a father and a son, where 6 months of poisoning and 47 doses of temazepam and plans to steal everything collapsed into 4 words. I stepped away from the support pillar. I walked toward him slowly, my 60-year-old legs carrying me across tile that felt like it stretched for miles. Special Agent Caldwell nodded permission granted for a final conversation before Sterling disappeared into the criminal justice system. The sound of phones clicking, a dozen travelers capturing video of the arrest, the confrontation, the father and son moment that would be posted to social media within minutes, stripped of context, reduced to spectacle. I stopped 6 feet from my son. I looked at his face. The face I held when he was born. The face I taught to tie shoes and ride bicycles and drive cars. The face that smiled at my birthday party while planning to steal everything I owned. I answered his question with the only truth I had left. "Because I am still your father." Sterling stared at me for 3 more seconds. Then the detectives resumed escorting him toward the airport police office. He did not look back. I stood alone in the security checkpoint area while travelers flowed around me like water around a stone. Being someone's father is not something you can resign from, even when your son tries to kill you for inheritance money he will never touch. I wear the oldest suit I owned, my son's federal sentencing. A 30-year-old gray wool two-piece I bought for job interviews when Reagan was president. The jacket fits poorly now. The shoulders sag, the lapels are too wide for contemporary fashion. I choose this suit deliberately because I want Sterling to see that I will not spend money even for this moment. He tried to steal $520,000 from me. I will not give him the satisfaction of seeing me in new clothing. The United States District Court for the District of Oregon occupies a modernist concrete building in downtown Portland. I arrive at 8:30 on Thursday morning, July 18, 2024. Conrad Langley meets me in the lobby. He wears a charcoal suit that fits correctly. He looks at my clothing and says nothing. Judge Eleanor Webb is presiding, Conrad tells me as we ride the elevator to the 14th floor. Former federal prosecutor. She has a reputation for fairness but no tolerance for manipulation. Sterling's attorney negotiated a plea agreement. The sentencing is a formality. I ask what sentence the agreement specifies. 12 years federal prison, Conrad says. He will serve a minimum of 10 years before becoming eligible for supervised release under federal good conduct provisions. The attempted murder charge was reduced to aggravated assault as part of the negotiation. The financial fraud charges remain. The elevator doors open. We walk down a corridor with sealed courtroom doors on both sides. Conrad stops at room 1402. He puts his hand on my shoulder and asks if I am ready. I tell him I do not know how to answer that question. Courtroom 1402 is smaller than I expected. 20 rows of wooden benches face a raised judge's bench. Sterling sits at the defense table beside his court-appointed attorney. He wears an orange Washington County Jail jumpsuit and wrist restraints. He does not turn when I enter the courtroom. I take a seat in the front row behind the prosecution table where Celeste Caldwell arranges documents in manila folders. Judge Eleanor Webb enters at 9 o'clock precisely. She is a black woman in her late 50s with silver hair and reading glasses on a chain. She sits behind the bench and reviews the case file for 3 minutes without speaking. The courtroom is silent except for the ventilation system cycling air through ceiling vents. "Mr. Whitfield," Judge Webb says, finally looking at Sterling, "you have entered a guilty plea to 1 count of aggravated assault, 3 counts of wire fraud, and 1 count of conspiracy to commit fraud." Do you understand that by entering this plea you waive your right to trial? Sterling stands. His attorney stands beside him. Yes, Your Honor, Sterling says. Do you understand that the sentence I impose today is binding and cannot be appealed except under extraordinary circumstances? Yes, Your Honor. Judge Webb looks at Celeste Caldwell. Does the government wish to make a statement? Celeste stands. She is 47 years old, a career prosecutor who has spent 7 months building a case she will not take to trial. The government recommends the court accept the negotiated plea agreement, she says. The defendant systematically poisoned his father with temazepam for 8 months while stealing more than $400,000. The aggravated assault charge reflects the severity of the harm caused. The 12-year sentence is appropriate. Judge Webb turns to me. Mr. Vernon Whitfield, you submitted a written victim impact statement. Would you like to address the court in person? I stand. My hands do not shake. I have practiced what I will say for 3 weeks, editing the statement the way I edited case reports for 27 years, removing emotion, retaining only facts. I speak for 15 minutes. I describe waking each morning for 8 months with cognitive fog. I describe drinking tea my son prepared and believing he cared whether I lived or died. I describe finding the empty temazepam bottle in my kitchen trash and realizing my child was attempting murder. I describe the 4-week detoxification at OHSU and the tremors that lasted through February. I describe the $520,000 Sterling planned to take to Mexico. I do not cry. I do not raise my voice. I recite facts in chronological order as though testifying at someone else's trial. When I finish, Judge Webb nods once. Thank you, Mr. Whitfield, she says. The court recognizes the extraordinary dignity you have shown throughout this proceeding. She sentences Sterling to 12 years in federal prison with parole eligibility after 8. She orders full restitution of all stolen funds, plus medical expenses, a total of $576,000. She remands Sterling to the custody of the United States Marshals Service for immediate transport to Federal Correctional Institution Sheridan. Sterling turns and looks at me for the first time since I entered the courtroom. His face shows no expression I can identify. The marshals lead him through a side door. He does not look back. Judge Webb addresses 2 additional defendants before adjourning. Dr. Rufus Keller, the physician who prescribed temazepam using fabricated medical records, loses his medical license permanently. He receives 3 years probation and must pay $47,000 in restitution. Hayes Greer, the pharmacist who filled fraudulent prescriptions, receives 5 years federal prison. Neither man looks at me during sentencing. I leave the courthouse at 11:15. Conrad walks with me to the parking garage. He asks if I need anything. I tell him I need to drive home. The route from Portland to Salem takes 47 miles on Interstate 5 southbound. I merge onto the interstate and set the cruise control to exactly 65 miles per hour. The math is simple: 10 years minimum before supervised release eligibility, 10 years to decide whether I will drive back to this courthouse and submit a statement to the Federal Review Board about whether my son deserves to walk free. I do not know the answer yet. The first safe cup of tea I drank in 8 months came from a hospital cafeteria packet marked Lipton Original, individually sealed, tamper-evident, impossible to poison, and I held it in both hands like a man learning to trust heat again. That moment comes 3 weeks after my son's arrest. 6 months before his sentencing in a hospital room, where I will spend the next 4 weeks learning whether my brain can recover from what Sterling did to it. I drive to Oregon Health Sciences University Medical Center on Monday afternoon, December 18, 2023, carrying a small overnight bag and a printed copy of Dr. Nyland's referral. The campus sprawls across Marquam Hill in southwest Portland, a complex of research towers and clinical buildings connected by Skybridge. I parked in the patient garage and followed signs to the neurology wing. The intake nurse is a woman in her 40s with efficient hands and a voice trained for delivering bad news gently. She takes my insurance card and referral letter and asks how long I was exposed to the benzodiazepine. 6 months, I tell her. 47 documented doses. My son was very thorough. She looks at me for 3 seconds without speaking, then types something into her computer. "We will take good care of you, Mr. Whitfield," she says. They assign me to room 7 West 412. A private room with a window facing the Willamette River Valley. A neurologist named Dr. Reyes explains the protocol. Controlled detoxification under continuous monitoring. Blood tests every 3 days to track metabolite clearance. Cognitive assessments weekly to measure recovery. The tremors in my hands should resolve within 6 weeks. Memory formation was never compromised, only motor control and sleep architecture. I will remember everything that happened. I ask if there will be permanent damage. Your baseline cognitive function appears intact, Dr. Reyes tells me. We expect complete neurological recovery. I nod and thank him. I do not tell him that some kinds of poisoning have no antidote. The detoxification begins that evening. They give me nothing, no medications, no sedatives, no sleep aids. The protocol requires natural clearance, the body metabolizing accumulated temazepam at its own pace, while doctors monitor for seizures or cardiac events that never materialize. My son poisoned me efficiently enough to cause symptoms, but not efficiently enough to cause organ failure. Even in attempted murder, Sterling followed guidelines. The first week passes in a haze of tremors and insomnia. I sleep 3 hours each night in 40-minute intervals. My hands shake when I hold a water glass. Dr. Reyes visits every morning to ask me to recite months backward from December and count by sevens from 100. I complete both tasks correctly but cannot remember what I ate for breakfast. The second week brings improvement. The tremors decrease. I sleep 5 hours nightly. A physical therapist teaches me exercises to rebuild fine motor control. I practice holding a pen steady, writing my name in cursive, buttoning my shirt without assistance. These are skills I performed unconsciously for 60 years, now requiring deliberate concentration. By the third week, my blood tests show significant metabolite reduction. Dr. Reyes tells me my cognitive baseline is returning to normal, that the tremors should resolve completely within 6 weeks. He uses the phrase, complete recovery. I nod and smile and do not tell him that some wounds leave no visible scar. On Wednesday evening, January 10th, a cafeteria worker delivers my dinner tray with a pot of hot water and an individually wrapped tea packet, Lipton Original sealed in foil tamper. Evident impossible to poison. I hold the packet in both hands, feeling the weight of it, then tear it open and steep the bag for exactly 3 minutes, the way I learned 60 years ago. I drink the tea slowly, tasting only Lipton and hot water and safety. No chemical aftertaste. No drowsiness creeping through my limbs. No fog settling over my thoughts, just tea. I set the empty cup on my bedside table and weep for the first time since my son's arrest. I do not weep quietly. I weep the way men weep when they have postponed grief past the point where control remains possible, the way men weep when they realize their child tried to kill them, when they understand that their son valued $500,000 more than his father's life. I weep for 30 minutes holding an empty tea packet, mourning a son who is still alive but lost to me forever. A night nurse hears me from the corridor and enters my room without knocking. She does not ask questions. She brings me tissues and a second cup of hot water and waits until I can breathe normally again before she leaves. I sleep 7 hours that night without waking. The fourth week brings final clearance. My blood tests show temazepam metabolites below clinical significance. Dr. Reyes schedules my discharge for Tuesday, January 15th. A social worker asks if I have support at home. I tell her I live alone. She gives me printed resources for counseling services I will never call. On Tuesday morning, I pack my overnight bag and wait for discharge paperwork. My phone rings at 9:30. The caller ID shows Clayton Merrick, my former colleague from the Oregon Insurance Division, a senior fraud investigator who worked the cubicle next to mine for 12 years before retiring in 2019. We have spoken twice since Sterling's arrest. Clayton called the day after the airport apprehension to tell me I did good work. He called again in November to ask if I needed anything. Both conversations lasted less than 5 minutes. I answer on the third ring. Vernon, Clayton says, I am calling to see if you are holding together. The news coverage has been brutal. I am physically recovered, I tell him. Neurologist says, complete clearance. That is not what I asked. I look at the empty tea packet still sitting on my bedside table. The foil wrapper I kept for 3 days is evidence that I can drink tea again without fear. I know, I say. I need a long time to answer that question. Clayton stays on the line for a long moment after I tell him I need time. Then he says he will call again in a month, and we both know he is giving me a deadline to figure out whether I am holding together or falling apart. I was discharged from OHSU 6 hours later with clear blood work and no answer. I signed my name on the final trust execution sheet in Conrad Langley's office on a Thursday afternoon in August, and for the first time in 14 months I wrote Vernon Whitfield with a hand that did not shake. 7 months have passed since I left OHSU with clear blood work and no answer to Gerald's question about whether I was holding together. I still cannot answer that question definitively, but my signature no longer trembles across legal documents, and that feels like progress. Conrad slides the notarized papers across his desk. 3 copies of a revocable living trust, naming the Oregon Elder Abuse Coalition as sole beneficiary of my estate upon death. My house on Sycamore Street secured. The lis pendens dissolved by court order. Title cleared. Assets protected from future exploitation by anyone including any child I might foolishly trust again. Your property is secure, Conrad tells me. No one can touch it now without court order and your explicit consent. 14 months to get back what was mine, I say. Most people never get it back at all. I gather the documents and place them in the leather portfolio I bought 30 years ago for carrying case files. Some tools outlast the work they were purchased for. I thank Conrad for his assistance over the past year. He tells me to call if I need anything. We both know I will not call unless absolutely necessary. I have already asked too many people for too much help. On Friday morning, I drove to Thornton & Associates to finalize restitution distributions. Renee Shelton, the senior paralegal who handles trust administration and financial documentation, meets me in a conference room with wire transfer authorizations requiring my signature. Renee is a precise woman in her early 50s who has notarized every asset transfer in my case with the efficiency of someone who understands that legal paperwork represents actual human suffering. She spreads 4 documents across the conference table: $30,000 to Oregon Elder Abuse Coalition, a donation from Sterling's seized accounts to fund elder protection services, $47,000 to Thornton & Associates reimbursement for 7 months of investigative work conducted before I knew whether I could afford to pay for it, 2 smaller transfers covering medical expenses and legal consultation fees. I sign each authorization. Renee notarizes each signature. The estate that Sterling tried to steal remains mostly intact, but I have spent $77,000 making other people whole. I have never spent money that felt cleaner. The coalition director called. Renee tells me as she files the documents in manila folders. She wants to thank you personally for the donation. Tell her I prefer no contact, I say. The money speaks for itself. I will pass that along. I drive home and spend Saturday afternoon on a task I have been postponing for 3 weeks. I place 2 crisp $100 bills in a white envelope with a handwritten note on unlined paper. Wade. Thank you for your honesty last year. VW. I address the envelope to Wade Riddle U-Store Self-Storage, 2847 Lancaster Drive, SE, Salem, Oregon, 97317. The original $200 I gave Wade bought information about storage unit 247 and 47 temazepam pills I have not forgotten. This $200 closes a loop that started when a minimum wage security guard chose integrity over ignorance. I mail the envelope at the post office on Saturday evening. The clerk sells me a single first-class stamp. I do not explain why I am mailing cash instead of writing a check. Some gestures require the specific weight of folded currency. On Sunday afternoon at 3 o'clock, Clayton Thornton arrives at my house carrying a leather briefcase and a cautious expression. We have spoken on the phone twice since my hospital discharge, but have not met in person. Clayton owned Thornton & Associates for 23 years while I worked in the public sector investigating insurance fraud. We collaborated on cases occasionally. We drank coffee together most Fridays for 12 years. After I retired, we maintained the friendship with monthly lunches that stopped abruptly when my son began poisoning me, and I stopped being reliable company. Clayton sits at my kitchen table and opens his briefcase. He removes a contract printed on firm letterhead. I need someone who understands fraud patterns and can audit contracts without missing details, Clayton says. You are the best I know. I read the contract. Consulting position, auditing insurance agreements for litigation support, 20 hours per week, flexible schedule, $40 per hour. No benefits, no fixed office hours, no obligation beyond producing accurate work. I accept on one condition, I tell him. Keep Tuesday mornings free. Done. When can you start? September 3rd, after Labor Day. Clayton slides a pen across the table. I sign the contract with a steady hand. He does not mention the $47,000 his firm spent investigating my son's theft before determining whether I could afford to pay for that investigation. I do not mention that Friday's wire transfer cleared that debt with money recovered from Sterling's seized accounts. Some debts are financial, others are moral, and the difference matters. After Clayton leaves, I stand in my kitchen looking at the wall calendar hanging beside the refrigerator. Next Tuesday is circled in blue ink with a notation written in my own handwriting: Salem Senior Center, 9 a.m. volunteer orientation. Tuesdays used to mean poison. Sterling sent his care packages on Tuesdays with clockwork regularity for 8 months, envelopes containing temazepam concealed in vitamin capsules delivered with expressions of concern about my health. I drank the tea he recommended every Tuesday evening. I experienced cognitive fog every Wednesday morning. I thought I was getting old. Now Tuesday means purpose. The senior center runs a fraud prevention program for elderly residents. They need volunteers with investigative backgrounds to teach people how to recognize financial exploitation before it destroys their lives. I meet with the program coordinator next Tuesday to discuss curriculum development. I do not know if this counts as healing or just as survival with better scheduling. I do not know if I have answered Gerald's question from 7 months ago about whether I am holding together. But I know I am looking forward to Tuesday for the first time in 14 months, and that has to mean something. On the first Tuesday morning of January 2025, I brewed espresso in my kitchen at exactly 6:30 and did not check the liquid for sediment or discoloration or the faint chemical smell of dissolved temazepam because Tuesdays no longer meant poison. 5 months have passed since I looked at my calendar in August and wondered whether anticipating Tuesday counted as healing or just survival with better scheduling. I have an answer now, though it is not the answer I expected. Tuesday means purpose. Tuesday means I wake without fear. That is healing enough. I drink the espresso standing at my kitchen window watching gray January light filter through bare oak branches in the backyard. The new espresso machine cost $240 a purchase I deliberated over for 3 weeks before deciding I deserved coffee that tasted like something other than survival. The espresso is dark and bitter and perfect. I taste only coffee. I eat breakfast alone at the kitchen table. 2 eggs scrambled wheat toast. Orange juice from a carton I opened myself and stored in my own refrigerator. These details still matter. I suspect they always will. At 7:30, I review consulting files for this afternoon's session at Thornton & Associates. Insurance contract language for a liability dispute in Eugene. I mark 3 clauses that contain standard exclusion wording designed to appear protective while actually eliminating coverage. This is the work I did for 27 years in the public sector. Now I do it for $40 per hour and keep Tuesday mornings free. At 8:45, I gather materials for my 9 o'clock volunteer shift at Salem Community Center Fraud Prevention Curriculum. I developed over 4 months of Tuesday mornings teaching seniors to recognize financial exploitation before it destroys their lives. 12 people attend the weekly session. None of them know my son tried to kill me. They know only that I understand how predators operate and how to identify red flags before signing documents or transferring assets or trusting someone who asks for bank account numbers. I am explaining to strangers how to avoid becoming what I was. At 10:15, Wade Riddle's delivery truck pulls into my driveway. I open the front door before he reaches the porch. Wade is 43 now, still working security and part-time delivery for the storage facility on Lancaster Drive. We have spoken perhaps 20 times since the day he accepted $200 and told me about storage unit 247. "Morning, Vernon," Wade says, handing me a flat package wrapped in brown paper. "Got a delivery for you, came from Thornton & Associates." "Thank you, Wade. How is business at the facility?" "Steady. You take care now." I carry the package inside and unwrap it at my kitchen table. Inside is a wooden frame containing a photograph I have not seen in 30 years. 2 young men standing outside the original Oregon Insurance Division office in 1995, both wearing ties and optimistic expressions, and the confidence of people who believe they can identify fraud faster than criminals can execute it. Vernon Whitfield, age 30, Clayton Thornton, age 32. We are smiling. A card tucked into the frame reads in Clayton's handwriting, "Still standing." I carry the frame to my living room and place it on the mantelpiece where Sterling's college graduation portrait used to hang. Friendship that survived replaces the son who betrayed. I do not know if this substitution represents healing or pragmatism, but the photograph looks right in that space. At 11 o'clock, I sit at my kitchen table with a blank sheet of paper and a pen I have owned for 15 years. How do you write a letter to the son who poisoned you without offering forgiveness you do not feel or demanding apology you will never receive? I write facts. Sterling, I am writing to inform you that the house on Sycamore Street remains mine. The trust is secured. The property cannot be touched by anyone including you in the event of my death. It will fund elder abuse prevention when I am gone. I have resumed consulting work. I volunteer Tuesday mornings teaching fraud prevention. I no longer check my coffee for sediment. I spent 35 years investigating insurance fraud. I documented schemes involving false claims, staged accidents, forged medical records, identity theft, and conspiracy. I never expected the deadliest case would be my own son administering temazepam in my kitchen while asking about my health. I do not offer forgiveness. I do not request response. I state only that you remain my son in biology, and I remain your father in name, and those facts cannot be dissolved by court order or personal preference. Your father. I fold the letter, place it in an envelope. Address it to Sterling Whitfield Federal Correctional Institution, Sheridan, and affix a first-class stamp. I walk to the mailbox at the end of my driveway and raise the red flag. Tomorrow, a postal carrier will collect this letter and route it through the federal prison mail system, and Sterling will read it in a cell 7 miles from where I stand, and nothing will change except that I will have acknowledged what we both are, father and son, poisoner and victim unreconciled. At 3:30 in the afternoon, I sit in my back garden with a second cup of coffee, watching bare January branches against gray sky. The garden I planted with Sterling's help in 2019 remains dormant but not dead. Roots remain deep and unbroken beneath winter ground. Some things survive not by healing but by refusing to die. Wade's truck passes on afternoon delivery rounds. I raise my hand. He raises his. This is the extent of our friendship, and it is enough. I finish my coffee as January light fades to gray. Tomorrow is Wednesday, and I have consulting files to review, and a volunteer shift on Thursday, and dinner tonight with Renee at the Italian place on State Street, where I have not eaten since before Sterling began poisoning me. Sterling becomes eligible for supervised release in approximately 10 years. I do not know if I will attend the hearing. But I know this. My house remains mine. My mind is clear. And every Tuesday when I brew espresso, I remember the final rule I learned from 35 years investigating fraud. The deadliest threat is not always the adversary you track in the field, but the absolute trust you invest without verification. I loved my son without verification. I drank tea he prepared without testing it. I believed the concern he expressed without investigating the man expressing it. I am 61 years old. My son is in federal prison. Tuesday mornings no longer mean poison. This is what dignified survival looks like, not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but the earned knowledge that some roots survive winter if they go deep enough. And to you listening to my story, remember this. Trust is earned through verification, not given blindly through love. I spent 35 years investigating fraud, documenting lies, and exposing schemes. I believed my expertise made me untouchable, but I made the fatal mistake of assuming my family was exempt from scrutiny. I loved my son without question, and that unconditional trust nearly killed me. Don't make my mistake. Verify the people closest to you, not because you doubt them, but because clarity protects everyone. Family betrayal is uniquely devastating because it shatters the foundation of who we believe we are. When the person you raised becomes your greatest threat, the revenge you seek cannot be violence. It must be survival with dignity. I chose silent revenge, legal action, documented evidence, and the reclamation of my own life. God's timing brought me clarity exactly when I needed it most. The lesson is, this family betrayal does not give you permission to abandon yourself. True revenge comes through justice pursued with patience and precision. If this story resonated with you, please leave a comment telling me what you think. Have you faced betrayal from someone you trusted? How did you respond? Share this story with someone who might need to hear it. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Dad's Silent Revenge for more stories about standing firm when life tests you. Your support means everything to me. Thank you for staying until the very end. I'm grateful you chose to spend this time with me. As a reminder, some details in this story have been fictionalized or adjusted to protect privacy and emphasize the lessons learned. What matters most is the truth at the heart of it, and I hope that truth stays with you.